Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to end this week with an album review. This one I think is going to be rather popular given that it is The Deer Hunter. I know it's not one of the 5 acts, but we are going to look at Antimai. Antimai? Yeah, Antimai, right? That seems right. Today, I don't know if this album is specifically going to be one that is heavily requested or has been heavily requested, but I do know I've seen a lot of requests to check out an album from this group. Now, what's interesting about this album is that there's 8 tracks on it, and they all are titled Ring Number dash Song Title. And the way that I see this is like a city, starting from the 8th ring, the most outside, as poverty. And then as we go through it, we have industry, LoTown, middle class, patrol, luxury, nature, and then a tower in the middle of this kingdom. That's my thoughts going into this. I know we've checked out Tower before. I think that was on a live stream. I don't remember anything of it off the top of my head, but I'm sure when I listen to it, things are going to click. I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that one. With all that said, let's get into this. Given that there's only 8 tracks, it's only 50 minutes long. Only 50 minutes, still a pretty lengthy album. We'll probably take breaks after each track, unless for whatever reason I don't have something to say about an individual track. But I don't see a need to group up 2 to 3 songs and then do an analysis on the bunch, given how few tracks there are on this one. So let's dive into this, kicking it off. Ring 8, Poverty. Oh, I forgot, this came out after Casey did his classical album. Oh, that's a fun little melody there.
Divide, walls prescribe the worth of a bloodline, Antimai.
Is that 7?
They've forgotten what it was created for.
Yeah, 7, 8.
Life has a different light, chance and lights, bereavement of every kind, Antimai.
Antimai. Alright, so I was saying it right. Really beautiful vocal harmonies. It blows my mind just how different this is from Act 1. Just past the dividing line between the blessed and cursed of Antimai. There's so much movement.
Hard to go it alone. Seas fade, hair often procreate, Antimai. We find them a use when they are old enough. Blessed to make the cut, past erased, all by the holy state of Antimai.
Such gorgeous. Everything's so bright too. Yeah, what's really cool is if you follow the snare and the bass kick, you get a nice 7/4 rhythm. Oh, it just dawned on me that some of these tracks might move into each other. Yeah, so right here, the main melody exists on a 7/8, while our drums are giving us a 7/4, which creates a bit of juxtaposition on the back half of the idea. No, I heard the first note of the next track. I wasn't quick enough on the draw. Yeah, that was like no time at all. They ran the song right up to the last second. Not the usual, like 2 seconds of silence between tracks. But yeah, so that right there at the end is something I wanted to point out at the beginning, but I never heard a section that I thought would work well once I'd caught on to it. But I had counted out the bass kick and snare. Ba ba bum 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 ba ba bum ba bum bum. And so it gives us this rigid downbeat against that bouncy melody that I just sang out with my mouth. And so what's interesting though is that when you follow the slower beats, bump, 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 what they've done is the melody starts playing on the and of 4. And so now our melody is emphasizing the offbeats that the bass kick and snare are emphasizing. And so the back half, it actually has this juxtaposition, this friction built into it, because one melody has pushed to a different rhythm than the other one has. The lead melody has skipped the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3. They've skipped that 8, right? 7's terrible because there's 2 syllables in it. Every other number in our opening 10 in English have 1 syllable except 7, and it makes counting past 7 really difficult because you kind of got to speed through it. I hate it. I developed this thing in my mind years ago when counting in my head for playing that I would just say 6 twice because it's 1 syllable. Anyways, getting on a totally different wavelength here. Anyways, what I'm saying is that there's this friction where our melody and our beat are together in the first half of the phrase, and then they separate out and kind of bounce against each other on the back half, and then line back up again, and then get off beat. And I really like this back and forth in the song. It gives it this static rigidity to it while still allowing the song to explore concepts of rhythmic bounciness, fun, and syncopation. It's what gives it a stability while still being childlike. And I think exploring both of these sides is probably something we're going to see in the lyrics. I actually have a lot of thoughts on this, just based on the concept of poverty as a whole and the music that has just been played along with that. I'm can't wait till we get into the lyrics to see what the themes are there. But I am noticing this duality in this track between my expectations going in, given the title, and what I ended up hearing while listening to it. Now, another idea that I'm looking at is the concept of 7/8. It's in here everywhere. I don't think we deviate from it at all. 7/8 is it's a diverse time signature because you can do what the drums are doing here and play across the beat and look at the larger concept of 14 beats. 7/8 is an odd number, but 2 bars of that is 14/8, and that's an even number. That's easily divisible in half. And we do have the drums, which tend to look at the bigger picture so that they can keep a consistency in their playing. But we also see the melody. They focus on that 7/8, and we have that hiccup at the end as we are expecting that eighth beat and instead get lurched to the first beat of the next bar. There is, in an essence, something missing. There's a beat missing. One that we would expect if we were in 4/4, which a vast majority of music is written in. It's the standard time signature. The idea of something missing is a concept that I want to keep in mind pushing forward into the lyrical section, because with the topic of poverty, with this being the lowest class of people, presumably on the outskirts of the kingdom, the first ones to be attacked if the kingdom were attacked, right? They're on the outermost ring. If an invading force were to attack this area, they would be the first ring to get hit. They're lacking security, they're lacking money, financials, they're called poverty. They're the furthest from the ruler, so it would take the longest for ideas to reach them, and if they had any notes for the king, assuming that this is that type of kingdom, it would take the longest to get to the king, and so any changes would be slow to change. I don't know if any of that's really where this is going, but the concept of missing something is sort of baked into the idea of poverty as a whole, and my idea of this oh snap, in the album art. I've been visualizing this thing based on the concept of rings and like fiefdom, medieval kingdoms and stuff like that, and sort of interpreting what I know about medieval England and how medieval Europe and how some of the stuff happened over there, mixing with this idea of rings. We have towers, we have this, and I just like made this image in my mind. But there's actually a really clear picture of it in the album art. I didn't notice this. I don't know how big that is for you on phones. You might not be able to see it. But inside of the triangle is a walled city, a kingdom, and there's walls. It's not even just like an outermost ring of things. There's literal walls separating all the different rings of society. Okay. Um, do I have anywhere to go with that though? I think it's just something I want to keep in mind heading into the lyrics is just the concept of missing something. I think there's a reason the song is in 7/8. Now 7/8 is also just a really fun time signature, and that could have been why they chose it. It's bouncy, it invites syncopation because it is an odd number of beats per bar. And this is a heavily syncopated, fun, bouncy song. It feels celebratory in a lot of ways. Not necessarily like they are celebrating a victory or anything like that, but just an event, some sort of. It sort of reminds me of festivals, right? Traditions, stuff like that. It also has a little bit of the beginning of Beauty and the Beast in it, where there's so much stuff happening. It just feels like a busy city. There's people all doing their own things, going about their morning and stuff like that, but it's fun, it's lighthearted. Nobody's really sad or dreary or depressed about their life. There is a happiness to be had here, which is part of the juxtaposition I was exploring earlier. Assuming that this track is about the lowest ring of society, it is very happy. Now, I'm curious if you're going to see this inversion. The further to the center we get, the darker and moodier the album becomes, to show this inverse relationship between power and wealth and happiness. I don't know if that's necessarily the way they're going. Again, it's just sort of my thoughts leading into this. I have a lot of ideas about the concept of this album, and I know nothing about it, honestly, at this point, to really make any informed decision, but I just have like these series of ideas that I'm wondering if Casey's going to take in that direction. Now, there is a lot of movement in this track, as I just brought up. The instrumentation is massive on this. As I mentioned, it is wild to think that this is the latest album from the people who brought us Act 1, which was, for all intents and purposes, a post-hardcore album. But it's also very clear to see where Casey's mind is at compositionally. There are still a lot of rock influences in this, but it feels more related to Renaissance style composition than rock. And I think this is because Casey had done a solo album, solo classical album, that, at least what I've heard from it, which I think is just one track now, but I could be wrong, is very much rooted in Renaissance style writing. And so what we end up here is a song that feels like it's inspired compositionally from classical music, but sonically from historical rock. Particularly, a lot of this feels very 70s to me. A lot of that comes from the harmonic devices, the chords that they're playing, the chord progressions, the overall atmosphere of it all. And I'm sort of enamored by all of this. I think this is one of the few albums we've had for album review where right from the start I'm hooked musically and thematically. I want to know what the album's about. I want to get to the next track and hear what the composition is. I don't know if I'll still be this way as we exit the album. But as of right now, one track in, I'm hooked on everything. And a lot of it comes down to the instrumentation and the composition of it. Right from the start, we have a lot of instruments coming in, little ideas off to the left, off to the right, center. They're sort of bouncing around. It is very Renaissance in that style. The way Renaissance music tends to work is that instruments have a role, they perform that role to the best of their ability, whether it's ornamental or foundational or melodic, and the idea was to capture a feeling or a thing. A lot of Renaissance music was about, what does nature sound like? What does work sound like? What if I wrote a song about a deer? What would that sound like? It was really about capturing life in music. And so a lot of it is very feely. That's not to say that it lacks depth or complexity, but it was simpler than Baroque, at least across the board. I'm not saying that every single Renaissance song was simpler or that there weren't any deep, complex compositional ideas happening during the Renaissance era, but just a majority of the tracks ended up being a lot simpler than the Baroque period that came before it. And we hear a lot of that here. Many of the instruments are playing simple ideas. It's the complexity, or the complexity comes from the variety of concepts all going off at the same time. And it does tell me pretty much from the beginning, this is a busy city. There's just something about it, and I wish I could put my finger on it, that when I listen to this, I'm like, oh, I feel this. I have seen this in musicals before. It's You know what I think it is though too? I keep bringing up Beauty and the Beast, the opening scene of it. But honestly, Disney is notorious for utilizing Renaissance style composition in a lot of their earlier animated works. And the opening track, Beauty and the Beast, is modern Renaissance composition. Much like this, they share a lot of similarities. Maybe it's not necessarily that I immediately picked up on it because of something it's innately doing, but I immediately picked up on it because I relate so much of it to a work that I'm very familiar with and understand that work, and I'm attributing those concepts to this because I see the parallels, and that isn't necessarily great. Sometimes it's fantastic to have that shorthand. It allows me to read into tracks much faster than I would normally be able to, and that has aided me well in the past, but it has also hurt me, and I've come to conclusions that were not necessarily accurate, and have been called out for it. That's definitely for sure. It is not always great to say this song is doing this because this other song that's kind of like it also did that. That is definitely room to introduce fallacy into an analysis. Into an analysis. God, that was tough to say. There is this other aspect, though, aside from the raw instrumentation and plenty of musical ideas being tossed around, all the ornamental stuff. On the other side of this, we have a prog rock vibe. Classic prog rock. We have the drums, we have the guitars, we have the wide vocal harmonies, and we have a lot of the chordal ideas and chord progressions found in earlier 70s prog stuff. I'm trying to figure out what the purpose of this is. Musically, the flow from the beginning to the end of this track, everything works. I'm not going to say that these rockier sections sound out of place against the more classical orchestration, but I will say that they are distinct, and I'm curious if they mean something specific to Casey, or if it's just because this is the Deer Hunter. It has to have rock somewhere in it. Because here's the thing, just this first track, I could totally hear Casey doing in his solo classical work entirely. He put his vocals on top of that, and I think the song would have still worked very well. It would have been quite cohesive and would have delivered many of the same vibes and themes that I understood from this version of it. I don't know that the rock aspects really changed much thematically for me. So my guess is that Casey has a distinct reason for utilizing them. And it probably is to keep a separation, a little bit, to keep a separation between this project and his solo work. But I do wonder if it means something thematically to him. Aside from that, do I have anything else to say on this track? It is bright, it is bouncy, it is fun. Lots of things going on. I'm sure I could listen to it 5 more times and hear new things every single time. Just because there's so much happening at any given moment. It is incredibly dense, filled with a bunch of simpler ideas, tons of ornamental stuff. It is a blast. And I find it so interesting that the song called Poverty is so happy. I'm really curious where this album goes emotionally, given the start that we have so far. Let me hit some lyrics, see what's going on there. We have a lot of ground to cover. So, let's start. This is actually the second work in this story, much like the 5 acts that precede it about the deer hunter. We are beginning a new story about Antimai, and I think more importantly, the Indigo Child, which is the name of both a short film and the album that precedes this. Though that album is, from what I can see, a bit of a teaser. There is an opening song that describes what or who the Indigo Child is. And then there is a second song that is a reprise of this that sort of follows up with many of the same themes. And then there are a bunch of instrumentals that, from what I can understand, are the soundtrack to the short film. And then the credits song, which simply says that the Indigo Child will be coming around again. Now, according to this, the Indigo Child appears to be a Jesus-like figure who is supposedly able to end the suffering of those who believe in her, but she refuses to do so for some reason. It's implied that the Indigo Child... Oh, it's implied in the reprise that she stays away because her followers are not doing what she wants them to. The credits of... Well, it's the credits track, but I assume this is also sung during the credits of the short film. Says the Indigo Child will be coming round again when she's good and ready. So keep praying until then. All this light and love for the Indigo Child. This is important because the beginning of this song starts with a chant that is just the word indigo over and over and over and over again, implying that the people on the furthermost ring of society have a prayer for the Indigo Child to come and take their pain away. Now, this song doesn't necessarily dive too much into the concept of living in the poverty ring. It touches on it a little bit, but it's also an introduction to the concept of Antimai, which is the city. It is the 8-ring city. Also, technically, we find out that there is no 8th wall. The 8th ring is literally anything that sits outside of the kingdom. People come from far off trying to get into Antimai, and if they can't, they set up camp outside the outermost wall, creating this 8th level of the caste system. Verse 1 says, "One kind met with a great divide, walls prescribed the worth of a bloodline. Antimai had forgotten what it was created for." Again, as I had mentioned, this also serves as a concept to the whole story, the whole world, well, at least the whole kingdom. That Antimai used to have a purpose. It says, "Outside, life has a different plight where chance invites bereavements of every kind." Whatever happened to the world, Antimai is a beacon of hope for normalcy. It was created as a safe haven for people, for something else, maybe for nature. The picture in the triangle up there doesn't show too much past the walls in the album art. Doesn't show too much past the walls, but what we do see past the walls is just desert. It's just cracked, barren land. It's possible that a lot of land is like that. This is one of the few places to live where there's actually society, civilization, nature, who knows? Wasn't there one of the track titles, though? Yeah, Ring 2 is nature, and it's closest to the king, so I think it's pretty clear that natural sights and smells and sounds don't really exist too much outside of the walls. It was created as a safe haven, though. It says Antimai had forgotten what it was created for. Now we have this caste system. People in the innermost rings look down on those on the outermost rings. And it also says don't get too attached to who you get to know. Later on, bringing up the idea... Oh no, that must have been it. Must have been an annotation I read on it then. Yeah. So it says, don't get too attached to who you know. Movement through the rings is both easy and difficult. You can quickly drop down in rings, such as if you've lost possession of something. Maybe you can't afford your house anymore. Boom, now you're down in the poverty ring. But getting up is near impossible. Don't get attached to who you know because you might not be able to talk to them tomorrow. So it's a very, not necessarily isolationist, but certainly individualistic society. The chorus speaks about how people come from far and wide and are dying just to get a glimpse. They never quite get it. It says the bridge speaks prominently about the people here in the poverty ring. We're going hungry and we're out of time. Faith in the child keeps us pretty all right, just past the dividing line between the blessed and cursed of Antimai. So I think that's where some of the positivity of the music comes from, because everything I'm reading about this poverty ring is negative. It basically isn't even a ring of the kingdom. As far as I'm concerned, um, it doesn't exist as part of the city of Antimai. It's literally just the people who are outside of it who gather. So I'd wager that there's no governmental support going on here. Um, it is it's just a crowd of people at a border. They're on their own, part of the vast wasteland, just on the cusp of coming into society, but not quite there yet. It sounds hard. It sounds difficult. It says that they're going hungry, and the music makes it sound busy and chaotic. But there's a beauty to be had here. At least the music is telling me that. And the only thing I can see in the lyrics that lean into that is their faith, that the indigo child will come and take their pain away if they just believe and pray hard enough. And that's what the bridge alludes to. We're going hungry, we're running out of time, but faith in the child keeps us pretty all right. Things aren't great, but we keep our spirits up somehow, is how that reads to me. Now, verse 2 is interesting because it speaks of a darker side, even darker than the caste system, even darker than letting people be hungry on the outskirts. It speaks to a darkness that's integral to how the city runs. It says, new home, hard to go it alone. Seize fate, pair off and procreate. Antimai will find a use when they are old enough. Young blood blessed to make the cut, past erased, all by the holy state of Antimai. Now, I don't know if the use of holy state of Antimai there is supposed to speak of some religion that it is. It is, maybe the entire city of Antimai has, a city religion to it, and this is the holiest area in all the lands, or if it's just simply saying that this is a place of growth, of birth, of life that isn't anywhere else. That makes it a holy land unto itself without really having a specific religious connotation to it. But just prior to that, it speaks about how the city uses the youth. It says, pair off and procreate. The city will find a use when they are old enough. Young blood blessed to make the cut. The annotation mentions that children are taken on their 8th year to forcibly work for the state until their 20th year, and even so, some don't necessarily return home at that point. All of this is established and explored in the short film. So that's where we are at right now. The 7/8 makes sense. Ooh, does it though? So the concept of a time signature missing a beat. They're missing one thing to be safe, to be happy. It's to get in. It's the one thing that everybody here on the 8th ring is missing, but I also find it interesting that the time signature is 7. That concept wouldn't work all the way down if we did 8 for ring 8, 7 for ring 7, 6, 5, 4. We could do 3, 4 for ring 3, but 2, 4, it's not uncommon, but it's not necessarily something that is rhythmically distinct. And then for ring 1, you would have to do 1, 4. And trust me, I've written a 1/4 track. You can find it on my Critical Compositions channel. It doesn't feel like one. It's really difficult to make a song feel like each bar is one beat, because the phrase can't really emphasize anything. So like it gets really difficult to follow along with that concept. Although I would like to hear Casey's take on it. I'd like to hear anybody's take on like a 1/4 time signature, because I never heard anything about it. I went in blind. I did my best. I don't think it was great. I had a couple people tell me it still felt like 4/4, and yeah, they're not wrong. I'd like to hear somebody else take a stab at it. But I'm not expecting that on this album, not by a long shot. But yeah, I do think that the 7/8, talking about a time signature feeling like it's missing something. These people are certainly missing something. But I do find the music a bit too bright and bouncy to fully capture the situation. The lyrics are incredibly dark. The music is not at really any point of it. It's not even like a hidden darkness underneath that is paired against a bright exterior, where on the surface level it feels bright and happy, but there's some dark chords playing underneath it, which could talk about the situation they're in, but they put on a face of happiness because they're hoping for the indigo child. Like, none of that's present here. It's just a fun, bouncy song. I don't really feel much of the weight of being in the poverty ring present in the music. And even the use of all the expanded instrumentation, the flutes, the strings, all of it brings in elements to me of nature, something that this ring isn't supposed to have access to. I know I get criticized on this often, that I lean too much into what I expect the music to be more so than what it is. It's valid criticism. I fully accept that. But this is one of those situations where I think I'm going to lean into it. I wish this song had explored the feelings of the lyrics emotionally in the music. And it's quite possible I'm just missing something on this first listen. And it's maybe that I'm wanting a darker view on this story than Casey wanted to write. There's a lot of things that go into it. But there's just an element of the lyrics that isn't present in the music that I wish was. Alright, we're going to push forward into the next track, which is called Industry, which... Okay. That's the wrong one. There we go. I said there we go. Thank you. Sometimes you just gotta get a little stern with the software to make it work. Alright, ring 7, Industry. I'm gonna back it up, make sure we don't miss that half a beat that I heard. Let's go. Ooh, what? That is funky. We got the shaker off to the right. That marimba sounds so good.
Walk this way when you wanna keep your secrets. Otherwise, it's a big mistake. Thinking that you're hiding who you are. 'Cause you're not
Got that simple drum beat. Simple, yet does the job. Very industrial.
join the rest of us.
the offbeat bell hits off to the left.
To get down in LoTown. They're probably gonna bring
It's
you
so
here.
good.
You were up in the pantheon. Now you're struggling to get out of this ditch. Well, we'll make you in the mechanic. Oh. You should have tried to hide it, lie it, deny it. Now this is as good as it gets.
That's a real fun melody right there.
They're driving you from integrating, so you better get used to it. You can be it, believe it, you see it, then you don't say anything.
A little bit of light synth work in here.
Your family tossed you out like the rest of us. And I heard you're new in town, so join
An electric guitar over there.
Probably gonna bring you here. Well, you were up in the pantheon. Now you're struggling to get out of this ditch. Well, we'll make you in the mechanic. Oh, go ahead and wave goodbye to the old town. Oh, say you're done with you, it's clear. You don't know what to do, but we know what you're going through, so let that panic disappear. Oh.
I can't believe the song's almost over already. I don't want it to end. Got a high A. Very clean though, that's the thing. It's just such a clean guitar or trumpet tone for such a high note.
Oh, from the low to get down in LoTown. They're probably gonna bring you here. You're up in the pantheon. Now you're struggling to get out of this ditch. Well, we'll make you in the mechanic. Oh, go ahead and wave goodbye to the old town. Oh, you say you're done with you, it's clear. Don't know what to do, but we know what you're going through, so let that panic disappear.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Dang man, I don't even need to finish the album. I know that's gonna be my favorite track off of it. There's just no way it isn't. It is so good. And the cool thing is it takes a lot of the compositional ideas from Poverty. Huge instrumentation. There's like 20, 21 instruments in this track. Lots of ornamental ideas, lots of simple concepts layered on top of each other to create something complex and depth and deep. It is many of the same techniques done in a completely different fashion, where Ring 8 looks more at a classical approach to writing. This looks at funk. This looks at disco. It is fun, it is bouncy, it is poppy, it is catchy. Every single bit in this, it just has such a strong hook. The rhythmic ideas are fantastic. And it is, you know what this song is? This is just musical candy store, right? No matter where I look, there's something tasty. I love all of it. You may have noticed I listened to that a bit more casually than I think I normally would on the channel. I couldn't stop grooving. I couldn't just turn that side off and listen intently. I just wanted to take the whole thing in and just, oh, so good. Strong bass presence here, strong brass presence. The trumpet's just killing it. And here's something I want to bring up. I didn't really touch on this much on Poverty, but Casey's vocals. It's interesting to hear where Casey started and his evolution, even just through the first 5 acts, is really interesting. I've only listened to a song from each of them, and I think I listened to them out of order. Like, I think one of the first songs we heard was from Act 3, and then I got thrown into Act 4 or 5, and then we listened to one from the first act. Like, it's kind of a smorgasbord I've pieced together retrospectively, but it's really cool seeing how he's evolved from a bit of I don't think he was necessarily lacking confidence in his vocal technique. It just wasn't exceptionally strong. It kind of fit in with a lot of post-hardcore vocalists where it's good enough for the style, but he wouldn't pass for, uh, for a classically trained vocalist. Here, though, his vocals are solid. The notes he hits are just right in tune. Very little variance to them. And he's playing these fast ideas, moving through notes rather quickly, hitting them all with precision, and singing within really interesting chords and modes. Stuff that he never would have had to sing in if he had stuck with the post-hardcore sound. It is really impressive to hear him grow in that direction, which is cool too because, also being the main composer to all these projects, it's been cool to see him grow in that perspective as well. I remember we checked out a track from Act 1, and it was clear that his ambitions were vastly overshadowing his skills, his abilities at the time. He wanted to do so much more, but didn't have the experience or the know-how to write the kind of music he was aiming for. And to hear him grow into that, and here as well, just vocally, this is an exceptionally strong vocal performance on both of these tracks. I kind of wish I'd been along for the ride on this. If I had heard of the Deer Hunter, years ago. I have to pronounce that the right way because I think it implies a specific version of the word deer. Because it is DEAR and not DEER. So it's about a well-loved or beloved hunter, not a hunter who hunts deers. And if I say the deer hunter, to me that feels like somebody who hunts deer. But if I say the deer hunter, that's somebody who's beloved. It all lines up with the emphasis. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else, but it makes sense to me, and I don't like saying it incorrectly for my mind. But I kind of wish I was there from the beginning. I think I would have enjoyed that first album, and I certainly would have been along for the growth because he's moved into a lot of ideas that I've always loved. He's got a very theatric, musical approach to stuff. Would have been cool to be there in real time for that growth. But I am glad I've got to hear it here, outside of time, all sort of in a single burst of a year or two. I will say, coming back to the ideas of theme, this is supposedly the industrial. I'm guessing this is the industrial ring. This is the ring where people are going to do the hard work to make sure that the place runs properly. So that everybody above them can have more luxurious lives with less garbage, less work, less manual labor, that kind of vibe. Nothing in here really felt industrial. It didn't feel like the lowest ring. In fact, if we're going by the music, the way the music feels is the ring I'd like to be in. So far, I'm going to say Ring 7's where I'd like to be. Ring 8 was a blast too, though. So, I don't really have an issue with that. We're definitely continuing along with the vibes that I don't think the musics are necessarily exploring similar thematic ideas that the lyrics are. My guess is that lyrically, this is going to be a bit heavy as well. We're going to be looking at one of the most dangerous sectors within the city itself, as industrial work tends to be more dangerous, even in our world. Certainly going to be more dangerous than middle class, which I'm going to assume is something analogous to pencil pushers, cubicle workers, something that might be mentally fatiguing but not physically demanding. Luxury, that ring's going to have very little work. Nature, presume, is just going to be about people don't live there. It's something for the ruler to see from his tower in ring one, and I doubt the ruler is going to have much work. So I kind of envision this to be one of the most dangerous areas, and the music certainly does not sell that. So I think that's just a thing I'm going to have to anticipate, is that Casey isn't interested in exploring necessarily the surface level themes of each ring in the music. I really hope someone corrects me on that though. I read a comment and I'm like, actually, this is how the music to Ring 8 lines up with its themes and how because I don't know. I shouldn't be disappointed, but I kind of am. And I think it's not fair, right? Let me go on a little bit of a tangent here, right? So, a while ago, I checked out The Warning. It was the first song I had ever heard from them. I don't remember what it was called. And I had a comment that put the band members up on a pedestal, said that the bassist studied, classical bass work since she was 4, and she had been playing, Jaco Pastorius and all these phenomenal prog bassist work when she was super young, and that, they were all prodigies on their instruments so young and playing so far above their, how skilled you think they would be at their age, that kind of stuff. And then I listened to the track, and it's a straightforward hard rock track, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, I kind of expected more given their pedigree. Just because you're super skilled doesn't mean you need to write the most complex, deep stuff, but that's the way the comment set it up for me. And I went on a little thing about not putting artists on pedestals, to always keep expectations proper. To remember that people are humans too, and that their wants and needs, especially in their creative endeavors, do not always match a perceived element of them. And I suppose this is a time for me to reflect on that, because when I hear that Casey's attached to a work, I expect more from that work than I would if somebody else's name was attached to it. I kind of elevate Casey quite a bit. I definitely look up to him as far as a composer. He's written some phenomenal stuff, honestly. And so I think I am a bit harder on him because I've put him up on a pedestal, and that's not fair to him. He is a human. I should treat him as such. Just because I would have done something different doesn't mean that what he did is wrong, and I shouldn't hold him against that. I shouldn't hold that against him. I think that's what I meant to say. I'm going to try to keep that in check going forward. 2 songs in, both of them have chosen not to explore the themes of the lyrics in the music. I need to understand that this is how things are going. I need to stop feeling disappointed when I find that dissonance, that disconnect, and stop expecting it. Alright. Is there anything else I wanted to bring up about this track? I don't think, dude, that one trumpet note though, I swear that was an A above the staff. And just so the staff is like, you know, the 5 lines on sheet music where like they put the dots on them so that you can read it. Yeah, so that's the staff. You can put notes above and below those lines depending on the instrument. That can get pretty high or pretty low. But an A above the staff would be a couple of lines above that top one. And I don't think an A above the staff is too high. B was a bit at my range. I could hit a D at my peak. But the thing is once you get up there, it becomes really difficult to have a full body tone. And this trumpeter had a very clean sound to that pitch. It was crisp. And that's why I think what stands out to me, not so much that he could hit the note because it isn't that hard, but it's that he sounded good doing it. And honestly, when you get to a level like this, that's how a lot of it comes down. Where the difference between a mediocre player and a great one isn't the range they can hit, it isn't the techniques they can do, but it's how clean they can do them. And Casey's definitely got a really great trumpeter performing on this track. All right, lyrics. All right, so Ring 7 Industry does look at an area of the city of Antimai where people just work all the time. Your job is your life is your job. I assume most of the ways that people are working is to keep the city running well so that all the higher tiers can enjoy the stuff that they take for granted. And that this is, remember, the lowest ring of the city. The 8th ring doesn't exist, it's just everyone else. So this would be the lowest level that you could get within the city without getting kicked out, which from what little lore I've read so far isn't possible. Once you're in, but you can definitely be given a terrible job like this, but you still have the comfort of housing and food from doing the job. What's really interesting is that this whole concept of being a cog in the machine doesn't really get spoken about for a couple of stanzas. In fact, the first time it comes up is in the chorus, which is the 3rd stanza of the song. It says, "Now you're struggling to get out of this ditch. Well, we'll make you into a mechanic," which is an interesting way of pronouncing mechanic, which leans into the industrial side of things. But there is a dash between mecha and nick, and both are capitalized, so I assume they have their own emphasized syllables. So we have mechanic. But then it's hidden again. We talk about other things before coming to the second chorus and bringing this idea back up again. So if the song isn't actually about working, what is it about? And this is interesting. It's about people who are thrown out of higher tiers. In fact, the chorus says if you're too low to get down in LoTown, which we'll see is ring 6, if you can't get into just the second one away from the outer wall, this is where you end up, the furthest wall that's still within the city. Now, we also see in the pre-chorus, so your family cast you down, join the rest of us. This is a concept that comes up often. This is what the song is about. He says, join the rest of us, bio-pariahs. I'm kind of curious why. Like, pariah already indicates an outcast. So a bio-pariah would be a human outcast? An organic outcast? Are there robots living here? I didn't take it to be that type of sci-fi, but maybe there is. Maybe I should have watched the Indigo Child prologue before listening to this. I don't know. But the word biopariah comes up a lot, and I don't necessarily think... Let me rephrase that. I don't know the purpose of putting the prefix bio in front of it, since I assume everybody is a bioorganism. Maybe there's just more to the lore I need to understand. But that word did stand out to me, although it's interesting that the inverse of this is that we'll make you into a mechanic. We know that you're an organic pariah, but we'll turn you into a cog in the machine. Now, verse 2 introduces something interesting. We saw earlier, it said, so your family cast you down. You did come from a higher ring. Your family shoved you out, and now you're down here with us. Verse 2 says you should have tried to hide it, belie it, deny it. Now, this is as good as it's going to get for you. The job and you, there's nothing that can keep the job and you from integrating, so you better get used to it. You are the job is you, the job is life. You're going to do this for the rest of your days. You're going to get housed, you're going to get fed for it. It's better than being out there with the poverty people. But this is it. This is your whole life now, and there's no way of getting out of it. The whole idea that it's difficult to climb back up the ranks, but it's not just even that. They weren't tossed down for their own actions. They were tossed down to this ring because their parents tossed them down here. Their family cast them out. You should have tried to hide it. I picked this theme up before I even dove into the annotations. The concept of hiding a quality about yourself so that you don't get disowned by your family lines up really well with LGBTQ people. And it's actually been commented on by Casey that it does line up with that. Where was it? Oh yeah, it was explained at the Deer Hunter summer camp that biopariahs are analogous to being an outcast for being LGBTQ. It's interesting that that's incorporated so heavily into this, and that the biopariahs are integral to running the city. They just can't be seen. They're still required to make things work, though. It's an interesting perspective to put on that. And that's pretty much the whole song. You can wave your old life goodbye. You're down here now. You're not getting out. Life's going to suck. You're going to work for the rest of your days. We're here for you, though. But also, you kind of got to get used to this. So, if the outside is people who aren't part of Antimai, and the first ring is people who are treated no better than machines, where does that take us next? The next ring for us is LoTown, where we actually mentioned just in this previous song, if you weren't good enough for LoTown, you end up here. Let's see what's going on in this ring.
blasphemy. We need more
very spacious.
Car decisions never looking back. Autonomy short-lived, they don't forgive, and so we're damned by autocrats to feed the mouths in need. But the quotas are too much, the yield's not enough. We worked our hardest, but the basin's drying up, and they deny that simple truth. They seem
Loving the building here.
resolute to fail.
Every 8 bars or so, we find a new layer to add. The call and response on the 2 vocals.
Make decisions when to quote a god to get what they want. Down here, we all grow anything we want to, and every single bloom's a victory. Any joy you can find is encouraged by the consistory. Down here, we share the weight of every burden, but every sister is your devotee. Whoever you were, when you come here, it's ancient history.
It's very swirly feeling, like I'm getting swept up into the energy of it.
The sunlight rarely warms the ice enough to break a sweat, but nothing rivals just how cold another's judgment gets. This bit of distance sure does hush those holy epithets. The city's voices bounce around till nothing
Very uplifting.
we dissociate from anyone who's never
It's very energizing. It feels like a really good pep talk.
until you're with us down here. Down here. Down
So that final note is a bit ominous. But what I get out of that song is one of unity, which I think is interesting. I'm curious as usual, the lyrics are going to be on this. This one is less dense than the other two. The layers are all presented not as individual elements to be flittering around the song, but as something to build and grow and stack on top of. This is the first song where we had a bit of a slow burn. Every 8 bars, we presented a new layer to add on top, a new layer to add on top. Interestingly, this also provides us a wall that we slowly put bricks on top of, and is honestly our first divisive wall. The eighth ring again doesn't exist. The poverty area is outside of the city, but we do have this wall being built between the industrial and LoTown. But also, I see it of growth, of utilizing the expertise of your neighbor to aid in the expansion of the area. It is about standing on the shoulders of giants. It's about growing as a whole. I think it's why this track also has so many vocal harmonies to it. There was that one section, it was the call and response of Casey and then the choir, and then Casey and then the choir. The only other track we had that on was Poverty, which was about a group of people praying together for the indigo child. Industry doesn't really make sense to have too many choir aspects to it because it was a single person introducing presumably us to the city, to the ring. There's a lot of you did this and you should have done that. But yeah, this one, it feels like a collective, building something piece by piece and working together to create a work of art, something beautiful, more so than a bunch of individual ideas, which Poverty certainly leans into that. Just a bunch of disparate groups of people all coming to the city of Antimai for their own reasons. And while they do find this collective prayer for the indigo child, a lot of it is personal. They didn't arrive here together, and the only thing tying them all together is that they all want into Antimai. Industry is also flittering and complex and layered in that direction, because at least to me it's supposed to represent like hundreds of cogs in a machine, thousands of cogs in a machine, all working together for the greater purpose. It's very industrial from that perspective. It's about a lot of little tiny things working together to make one big thing function. But this song tells me a different story. It's the first one that really deviates from um, that heavily ornamental writing to something that is more cooperative in a singular sense. Instead of a bunch of unique ideas going off at once, it is one idea being presented by many people. It feels more wholly cohesive. Cohesive is the wrong word, because the other two tracks are cohesive in vision as well. But this one feels like I have a lot of metaphors, but I don't think any are going to be worthwhile to dive down. It's just a bunch of people working together to do a big task. And I find that to be really endearing, especially the build up in the middle of it. Through that lens, there's actually less to talk about. It's less complex from a compositional standpoint of multiple varied ideas. It focuses on just 5 or 6 concepts and leans into them. Although we do have that brooding tuba note at the end. What is that representing? I don't know. Here's something. I'm curious where this is all leading. As far as I can see it, we have a series of vignettes here. We have an introduction to this story with the Indigo Child. The Indigo Child has been name dropped, but is not present in this story. It doesn't seem like they'll be present. In fact, I don't even really see this as a story, as we are just getting, as I mentioned, vignettes, little short stories about each of the rings. This feels more like an opening act of a story, where we get to know the world we're in, the lore of it, how this city works, and begin to see where the stresses and uh, friction lies in the characters' interactions with each other, and how that's going to drive interaction and tension going forward. But I don't actually think we're going to see that. I think there's a lot of story left over for more albums in this world. Now, I've been thinking about theme. Here, assuming I have a strong read of it, I think we're finally going to find a song where I think that the musical themes and lyrical themes line up. We'll see when we get there. But I am picking up on some vibes, some things I've said, some feelings I have that I've mentioned before. Particularly when we checked out The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. And, well, some other tracks too, not just by Genesis, isolated tracks by bands like Yes. Even Pink Floyd, I've had these same criticisms about. I don't think it is sheer coincidence that my difficulty in understanding the disconnects between my perception of the themes presented in the lyrics and the music have impacted the way that I've come to appreciate an album. Wait, no, I don't think it's coincidence that my issues with that are present both in this album and in other prog rock albums we've checked out. I'm curious if Casey is wearing his inspirations on his sleeve here and writing music in a way that I have still had a difficulty coming around to. And that's where the music is designed to craft an atmosphere for specific events and not a template for the emotional resonance of the music. I tend to prefer my music to be emotionally tied to the lyrics. I think this is a thing I've made clear in the past. I've improved on being a bit more objective about it over the years, but it is still my subjective taste that I like that synergy to be present. And that's really all I wanted to bring up with some ties. There were certainly some parts in this track and especially Industry where I was like, dang, this kind of reminds me of Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. And even when we had Poverty, I mentioned a very distinct 70s prog feeling in there. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think Casey is very influenced by this era of music, and he does a good job of using it as a spice and not directly referencing it too often. But I do think that I can hear influences of it in everything of this album so far. And as usual, I think that's awesome. I mentioned another time, I think it was this week, might have been last week. We checked out an artist, and I mentioned that they do a really great job of. Oh no, it was Coheed and Cambria from yesterday. That's pretty bad. That they do a really great job of incorporating ideas from everything that inspires them, but that the music they write is still distinctly them. And I think Casey sits in that same area. If I heard this, I would immediately know that it's Casey. I might even guess that it's the Deer Hunter, but I can definitely hear elements from a lot of other things that influence his writing. They just don't dominate it. And I think that's one of the best things you can do as an artist, especially as you grow, is to incorporate as much information as you can from as many different sources. Have a divisive, disparate group of sounds that influences you as a musician. Explore all sorts of different artistic endeavors if you're a visual artist, you know? Uh, I think it's important to have all of this so that you can create the best thing rather than being stuck within a single realm. I only listen to metal, so I only know how to write metal. And so what you end up is writing metal. It's not the best metal. It's not taking it any interesting direction. And who knows what you could have done if you had explored punk, rock, pop, hip hop. You don't have to incorporate all of it, just learn something. I'm not a big fan of black metal. I'm never going to write a black metal track. I might, but it'll be out of morbid curiosity more than anything else. But I have still incorporated ideas that I've learned in black metal into my music. None of it you would call black metal, but I don't think I'd be writing what I am today without having been introduced to the genre. It's important to get influences from all sorts of sources, but to always allow them to be still your own work, for them to be spices and nothing more. Not to say that revival movements are bad or anything like that. If you want to make some 70s funk, make some 70s funk. If you want it to be to the T, classic, feels like it came right out of the 70s, go for it. I'm not saying that's the wrong way to do it, but I do think as we grow, it should be about figuring out who we are as artists. And part of that is exploration. And I think artists like Casey show that off really well. Where you can still hear, it's like it's his sound. You're not going to confuse this with anyone else. But you can distinctly feel what has been a source of inspiration for him over the years. All right. LoTown lyrics, I guess. Yeah, let's kick it. All right. I have made an alarming breakthrough. So, I'd kind of alluded to this already, and I didn't lean into it as hard as I think I should have. I mentioned how the music of poverty makes me feel like an area bustling with life, that there's so much movement going on and it's so much noise, it feels like an open marketplace. Ring Seven's industry made me feel like I was part of a cog in a machine, that there's so many small moving parts going on, it's difficult to notice them all, and it's easier just to take in the whole of the song. LoTown, I talked about how it feels like a bunch of people working together, building a wall, and standing on each other's backs in order to get what they need done. These are the musical themes that line up with the lyrical ones. I don't know how I missed this. Again, it's not quite emotionally resonant. I feel like this album isn't quite as dreary as the lyrics are. It is a very dark sci-fi tale. Musically, I'm dancing around this whole time. There is that juxtaposition. But I think I focused too heavily on that and missed the forest for the trees. There is a lot of synergistic energy going on between the lyrics and the music. It's definitely possible and clear to find ways where the music characterizes the story. Or I guess more so that the music characterizes the ring. And I think that's what I was missing. I'm looking at this as a story, and I want the music to be a soundtrack to that. But honestly, the music is a soundtrack for the ring itself, not the story that takes place in there. It is a musical personification of what that ring of life is. Poverty is a bunch of disparate people existing simultaneously on the outskirts of the city. Industry is an industrial style of area. Everybody is just a piece of a machine. Everyone has a small part to play in a bigger concept. LoTown is about people working together and creating unity in that. It's not necessarily about the way that we should feel about these events. It is just the events from a cold, calculated perspective. I'm coming around to it, I think. I still don't think I should be dancing about discrimination, poverty, famished people, governments who don't help who they rule over, caste systems. I shouldn't be dancing to this music. Um, but I do think I was a bit harsh saying that there were no ties between these concepts, because there are. With that said, LoTown is about unity within the cast. LoTown is the people who are forced to grow crops. It says autonomy's short-lived and they don't forgive, and so we're damned by autocrats to feed the mouths in need. Their job is to grow crops for everybody in the city. Now, something interesting that I didn't touch on that kind of clicked with me a little bit here, in industry, the biopariahs are outcast from whatever ring they come from into ring 7, into the industry ring. This was an analogy for LGBTQ folk. Remember, I think it was in poverty we mentioned that the highest order of everything is to pair up and procreate so that we can have a workforce from ages 8 to 21 or whatever, right? If we don't have youth being born, we won't have a workforce and the city falls apart. LGBTQ folk might not be able to procrastinate, to procreate. uh, which makes them worthless in the eyes of the system. But I think it's interesting because it does make them positive for this ring. We're going to see that right here. It says we're damned by autocrats to feed the mouths in need. The mouths in need, the number of people who need food continue to increase because the highest order is to make more people. There will always be more mouths to feed as the population increases. I think it's interesting that the people who don't want to have kids or might not be able to might be seen as pariahs in the system, but would actually be seen as a group of people reducing the stress on a very important part of the system. As usual, was it last song? Something about hypocrites are the ones who make the decisions. No, I think it's this song then, isn't it? Oh, it is this one. In the chorus, he says, we're held beneath the monolith of their manipulation. We exist entangled in creation, both creating crops, creating food, but also bound by the creation of an ever-growing populace. And then he says, hypocrites too often make decisions, raring to quote a god. Yeah, the idea that, I think it ties specifically to them in that element, but also that they are ostracizing people who could be helping the system, all because they go against this main creed of procreation. That actually isn't a great thing for where we're at right here, because most of the song is about not being able to make the crops to feed people. The pre-chorus says, the quotas are too much and the yield's not enough. We worked our hardest, but the basin's drying up, and yet they deny that simple truth. They seem determined, resolute to fail. They see a problem and they stick their heads in the sand. It's not our fault we don't have enough food. It's yours. Just make more food. It's not possible, though. What I think is interesting is the outro. It speaks about how this place is in darkness. It says the sunlight rarely warms the ice enough to break a sweat. Possibly speaking about how high the walls are. It says, but nothing rivals just how cold another's judgment gets. So, much like everywhere else, the higher rings have a very harsh view on these people. And the fact that they don't provide enough food probably increases the tension between the higher rings and LoTown. But what's interesting is that they sort of wall themselves off from everywhere else. He says, this bit of distance sure does hush those holy epithets. From down here, the city's voices bounce around till nothing's clear at all. They're so far divorced from the other rings, they can't even hear their yells. It says, so we disassociate from anyone who's never made the fall. You'll never get us until you're with us down here. So I like the double entendre there. You don't understand our position unless you come down here and see it and talk to us and figure out what's actually going on. But also, you can't get with us until you come down here. And if you've made your way down here, that means you've been outcast from everywhere else. And now you're going to have to live this life, and you'll get it then. So, yeah, really great idea there. But also it talks about, again, ostracizing themselves. We're in this ring. No one else really cares about us. We can't even hear their problems anyways. We're just going to do what we need to do and keep pushing on with life. This idea of walling themselves up, of putting layers up to build a wall. Like, that's what the entire middle of this track was about musically. Every 8 bars adding another layer, walling themselves off. It's about how they support each other, do the work that needs to be done. They're hearing it together. A lot of the words here are us. There's a lot of elements of we don't hear them when you're here with us. The collective, very different from the other 2 tracks. And this is also one that musically lines up with collectivism, where the voices come together to produce harmony, more so than having a bunch of eclectic ideas all bouncing around like we had in the last 2 tracks. Very cool way of tying things together here. That's going to take us to the next ring, Middle Class. One of the longer tracks on the album. Let's dive into it, see what's going on.
Hard to believe he lets us wake up every day.
I don't know why this album is so dancey.
Keeps the alien away. 'Cause we have been assigned to turn 1 and 1 to 3.
There's that stronger musical theater sound I've been waiting for. Really cool harmonies on there. I think we have a new vocalist in here as well. Very Pink Floyd.
And the comforts enjoyed eclipse our
There is a little bit of darkness in this track that really hasn't been present in previous ones. I would assume middle class would be the turn to things being a bit better for the people, and the music is reflecting the opposite of that. Just a tad bit though. Speaking of heads in the sands, really smooth retardando there. Didn't change anything, we just slowed things drastically down. Very dreamy. Very laid back. The heavy reverb. It's like a really jazzy turn.
Hard to believe we've never realized that we'll run out of room to grow. Maybe we'll marry up, maybe we'll have a daughter who marries up, maybe she'll have a daughter who marries up. At least you're kind enough to meet in the middle between what has kept us alive and thriving, and what makes us wanna die for your life. On us to shine. But we gotta come on. What did we expect now? We keep our heads down half the time. No need to reflect how there really isn't anything to do.
there's some neat ornamental ideas. For the most part, this is kind of going on a hair bit too long. Which I think probably lines up thematically. I have some thoughts about this, but I want to hit the lyrics first just in case I misheard some lines. I want to give some incorrect analysis on something that's not even in the song. This is taking forever though. I sure hope Ring 3's almost 10-minute runtime is a bit more justified than this, though I'm also hoping this has thematic resonance, so maybe it all works out in the end. Alright, so I absolutely loved the jazzy vibe of this. We had those really key swells, stuff like that. The swell is just such an iconic sound of some of the more laid-back jazz stuff. The laid-back J stuff we had. I don't know where I was going with that long A sound. I've played a ton of stuff like that. It is very fun to play. The concept is a sforzando. It's where you start a note, you play it at full volume, and then you back it down and swell back into it. It is very fun. You get a group of cool cats to play with, and it is just a jam session every time. You just get something laid back and fun like this. A little easier to play, but just fun. And yeah, I'm sure this was a blast to record. This only comprises half the track, though. The other half focuses on something a bit dreamier. About a quarter of the tempo, tons of reverb, focusing on electric guitar, drums, and electric bass, with some very wide vocals on them. We've got Casey in the middle. We have, I think, female vocal off on the sides. And I think it's the first time we've heard that second vocalist too. We've had the choir, and that voice, that person might have been part of that, but I think it's the first time we've heard that timbre in isolation before. So I'm kind of curious what's going on with that. As usual, when it comes to, again, I might be putting a dude on a pedestal here. I'm trying not to, but I feel like a lot of decisions in Casey's works are intentional, and that they have meaning. Everything has a meaning. It's not just, yeah, that sounds good. It's like, oh, that sounds good and it represents this. So I'm kind of curious why have the second vocalist here and not in any of the other tracks where we have primarily used choirs, groups of people, rather than just a single vocal harmony on top of Casey's. But yeah, very wide production on those vocals, lots of reverb, the slower tempo. It's just very dreamlike. Something like a dream prog. Is that a thing? We definitely had proggier chord progressions going on here. And 70s prog rock likes to use their reverb too, so it lined up really well there. But this aimed for, I think, even more of a dreamy feel somewhere. Maybe in what they were playing, maybe in the production of it, I'm not sure. To me, it just felt like laying on some water, back down, and just looking at the stars, and just like contemplating life. Think about everything and nothing at all. And that's what those slower sections felt like to me. Very dreamlike, very introspective, very contemplative. just very lazy. Having a nice lazy day. And from that perspective, I think the jazzier sections work too. They are still dancey, much like industry, poverty have been, but it's dancing a different way where it's more of a slow dance. Not quite a romantic slow dance kind of thing, but definitely not the boppy bounciness that we had in Rings 8 and 7. This one is a bit more proper of a dance, a bit more controlled. You're not just letting your body go and doing what it will, you have some control over the dance, and the slower speed of it allows you to think ahead of time and figure out really what you want your body to do, what kind of shapes you want to cut as you move along with the groove of the brass, the drums. It's calculated. It's calculated beauty in a way that Rings 8 and 7 tended to have a more chaotic beauty. They were gorgeous in how many things were going off at one time. This is more unified, uniform. And still carries that laid back vibe that the dreamlike proggy stuff does as well. It isn't a fast dance. It isn't a slow one, but it's not a fast dance either. It's you can still kind of chill out. It's kind of just very relaxed, chill. We've hit the midpoint here. And I want to just bring up one thing. That's expectation. I know I haven't listened to a lot of The Deer Hunter, so I don't really have a room to craft strong expectations for what to expect next. And I'm sure that possibly having listened to The Indigo Child or Act 5 probably would have queued me up a little bit better for this. But in my mind, The Deer Hunter is still post-hardcore in its roots, progressive in its tendencies, in its aspirations, but post-hardcore in its roots. And honestly, it's difficult to hear any of that first album present in here at all. And I had already mentioned that it's pretty awesome to see the growth of this composer, this artist from the beginning to now. But there's also no way that I could have anticipated we were going to listen to Renaissance, prog rock, jazz, any of this. It is so far divorced from what I was expecting, which was rock in foundation. This has some rocky moments, but I'd call it a spice alongside everything else. I really can't put a finger on what I would call the foundational sound on this. It's also more densely layered than anything I could have expected from the group as well, and I think that also ties back to what I mentioned earlier with, his entire solo album. There's a lot of stuff that's being incorporated into this album. And as much fun as I've had with it, as much as I'm enjoying myself with it, um, there's still that part where I'm kind of in disbelief of what I'm hearing tied to this band's name. And I'm sure fans who have been along the ride and have listened to Acts 4 and 5, which were lighter than 1, 2, and 3, have listened to his original solo work, have listened to Indigo Child, knew where this album was going. Maybe they were caught off guard less than I am right here. But even 5 tracks in, I'm still like, dang, I would never have guessed anything like this would be what I'm listening to today. And I think I've done pretty well for having my expectations completely unmet. Usually it takes me a while to get into the swing of an album if I have the wrong headspace for it. But I feel like I've adapted pretty well to this. And I suppose the last thing I want to touch on is our ending. To be fair, I really think that's a 6-minute song with a 2-minute ending made out of a single loop. As I mentioned, there were additives to it, ornamental bits, little variations here and there, but each 8 bars was still like 90% the same as the one that came before it, and the one that came before that one, and the one that came before that one. It definitely started to grate on me how monotonous it all is. I do have a thought that it's tied to the lyrics. We'll hit the lyrics now and see if I'm right in that, but I don't want to toss it out there yet just in case I misheard them. But I do want to present that before I've read the lyrics so that it's not like, oh, you read the lyrics and then just made that up and tied it in. No, like I have these thoughts about the monotony of it. It is a core element of the outro that we haven't heard anywhere else. Every song has been paced exceptionally well. I'm somebody who I'm not a real big fan of a lot of repetition. If I say that something is paced well, it's definitely moving a bit fast for some people probably. And then to sort of slam on the brakes and have this extended like 2 minute and 15 second loop of this one idea, it's a drastic departure from the pacing of the rest of the album, and as I mentioned, I kind of expect it to mean something. So let me hit some lyrics, see if I'm anywhere in the ballpark on this one, and then we'll keep pushing on. This is a fantastically nuanced look at middle class from every perspective I can think of. It starts out and leans into the religion of this place. Hard to believe he lets us wake up every day. He, capital H, by the way, which is the God Emperor. That's something I didn't know until this track. Now, here's something really interesting. The pre-chorus says, "'Cause we've been assigned to turn 1 and 1 to 3. But God says, keep away the blood of the refugee, so most of us will come to see that we may never leave. But if we could," we'll get into that in a second, because that takes us into the chorus. "We've been assigned to turn 1 and 1 to 3. I think this works in two different ways. One, it looks at the financial element of the track. I'm not going to take credit for this read. It was entirely by the annotations on it. But the idea that it's to grow profits all the time. I don't know if that's necessarily something that's going on in this story. We haven't talked about money at all in here. I don't know how things are doled out. But there is a working to this middle class. They do have a job to do. But it also leans into the procreation element. Two people will make a third in the family. The idea that we need to continue creating more humans. The second line says, "But God says, keep away the blood of the refugee." Basically, don't taint your family lineage with anyone lower than you. Make sure you only create children of your caste level. Which I think is interesting, because we're going to see something a little bit later that juxtaposes this idea. So he says, most of us, we're never going to leave this ring. This is as good as it gets. This is a line that continues to recur throughout the album. Every ring knows this is as good as it gets because you can only fall down. It says, but if we could leave, we'd tell them, believe us. We've got it so good. We'll stay here with our heads right in the sand just like we should. We know there's problems below us. We're just going to ignore them. But, bro, it's so good up here on ring 5. You'll never believe it. This is really important for the latter half of this track. Verse 2 begins to look into a little bit of their views of the rings below them. We'd love if it was better out there, and we would fix it if we had the time, but the business begets a blindness. Yeah, we probably could help out the rings below us, but it's kind of a real big risk. We're just going to ignore it. Takes us to the outro of part 1. Says, muted shades give way to inner rot, creases deepen under your command, but worry leads to nothing anyway. And who are we to whine? At the end of the day, we realize we're just doing time. The idea that everything up to this point has been, it's so great. If we go to a lower ring, we'll tell them how great the 5th one is. But in reality, yeah, it's not that great. But why should we complain? It's not that bad. That's the kind of vibe I'm getting from this. But this leans into something more in the second part of the song, which looks at the negative side of things. Says, hard to believe we'll never realize we're running out of room to grow. Maybe we'll marry up. We'll have a daughter who marries up. Maybe she'll have a daughter who marries up. I think it's interesting. At the beginning, they've been told to keep away from the blood of the refugee. Don't talk to, don't get into relationships with, don't create friends with bio-pariahs. But here, the thought is maybe we could get somebody to move up a ring through marriage. They've been told not to marry down, but they think that the rings above them might marry down. I wonder if this is just delusional thinking, some mental gymnastics, a way to feel a little bit better about having your children, knowing that they're going to live lives just as bleak and boring as yours. We finish the song with, we gotta, come on, what did we expect? We keep our heads down half the time, no need to reflect. There really isn't anything to do, so sit back and power through. Better to take your chance on this earth. Best to live than to die for what you're worth. Living is more important than anything else. Doesn't matter how worthwhile your death might be, what kind of cause you're fighting for, it's still death. And that's scary. So we'll live a life of mediocrity instead of fighting for something more important. The final words before we hit our extended solo is, they got you buying your chains. I like this flip in the middle. First of all, I think it really was the middle of the track. It is about 8:42 is the length of the song, and from about 6 onward was the jazz section, the instrumental jazz section. 2 minutes prior to that seems about the time we introduced the jazz section entirely, and there were still some lyrics there. Based on my memory, it feels like we really did swap the song over to this negative reflection at the halfway point of the halfway point of the album. I'm curious if the rest of this album will explore darker themes. I don't know. I do like this idea of showing the duality of the middle class, though. I mentioned earlier on that I think they showed nuance to it. The reality is that middle class isn't a thing. It's something that those in power create to have a wall between them and the general population, the poor, the impoverished. You create a wall of contemporaries. You let them know, you're kind of like me, but you're in the same pit as everyone else. Don't let them drag you down. And now you have conflict below you. It's a really smart strategy, but the middle class doesn't exist. It's always those in power versus those not. And unfortunately, the middle class argument and descriptor tends to stick and tends to do its job well, as it does here. But I love how we not only see the fact that these people view themselves better than those below them, but also internally realize that they're also viewed negatively to those above them and that their situation is only marginally better than those below them. There is a inkling of solidarity here. At least they acknowledge things are worse below them. They don't have the conviction to fix things. They don't have the courage to push against the status quo, but they know that they're just the best of the worst. And I really like that reflection. It works so well at humanizing this group of people and showcasing, again, the nuance of what middle class is. I think then the extended jazz instrumental outro is a representation of their mediocrity. Again, I felt like it dragged on too long. It wasn't really doing anything. It was fine, but it wasn't exploring anything interesting. It wasn't doing anything new. It was just existing, and that's so much of what this song is about. It's a song about going with the flow, keeping your head in the sand to ignore the negatives and focusing on the positives. It's actually pretty good here. It's about dreaming of rising up the ranks, thinking that you're one tier lower than all the best. You can still go up there. You're divorced from the lower tiers. You're part of the high ones, right? A lot of that dreamy, stargazy, lethargic feeling is baked into the music. The ending, though, being that repetitive jazz section, is the repetition of life for these people. Not really having much to do. It's not bone breaking, it's not soul crushing like the industrial area. It's not poverty, it's not going hungry, it's not having a roof over your head like with the poverty ring, but it's not luxurious either. There's no option for adventure or to grow. It's just is. You wake up, you go to work, you come home, you go to bed, you do it again. You're not surviving, but you're not living either. You're stuck in the middle. And at least in the first few verses, buying into the propaganda of your placement at the table of the top rings. Yeah, it all comes together really well. It's a it's a heavy album. And the thing is too is the more that we get into the lyrics of it, the more I realize that it's probably quite reflective of Casey's experience with modern day living. While this is, I mean, like any good sci-fi, it's social commentary, but there's certainly the surface level read of what Antimai is and where all the people exist on it, but it also feels like analogies for experiences that lots of people have every day in the real world. It's very introspective, and Casey has good insight on every ring so far and their real world analogies, and has done, I think, a decent job. Sometimes, well, actually, most of it's a good job. Some of these are great. Like Middle Class, I think, was really exceptional as far as having perspective on the entirety of the situation. Yeah, very talented dude. Let's dive into Patrol, Ring 4. I'm going to assume, based on the title, that this is going to be alongside the Knights for like the medieval kings. People who paid for their room and board by being part of the enforcers for the ruling class. Which makes sense because they're above middle class, but they're below luxury and they're below the king. So, let's dive into Ring 4, Patrol. What? Ooh. Really fun auxiliary percussion stuff going on. Even our melody line's very percussive. Yeah, the rising and falling idea. That synth tone. The double vocal line. Very, Bear Ghost. Some of the instruments coming up, some of them sliding down. They line up. The two vocal bits working like that is so good. Some of that darkness. Bringing in some of the percussive ideas from our intro, just in a new environment. I love the production on that. It's very spacious. So I had a guess early on that the song was going to explore darker chord progressions as the album went on. I'm kind of right so far.
So we can bring you all to your knees. We can keep you
So unlike Ring 5, where the duality was a switch that flipped, this one, it's more fluid. The dark side and the light side keep battling out for which one's present. It's less of seeing underneath the surface like Middle Class was, and more about exploring the duality, the consistent cyclical duality of this ring. Very floaty too. There's some tension there. Alright, so this one's pretty cool. I think I got a strong read of this. Oh, I was like, maybe that goes into the next one. It's like a random last second note. No, it definitely seems to be about the night class, could be the police class, any type of person, as he said, who I never imagined people to hate me so much for putting them in their place. He said something about, I have power. It's like the big chorus part right there. It definitely seems like he was somebody who was a bit weak, and now he has the power. He has a little bit of that power. It's not just any power, it's the same power the king has, the ability to rule over others. And there's a darkness to that, right? There's this excitement, the power trip of it all, but there's an isolating darkness that we see on the other side of this track. I didn't catch any of the lyrics the first time through it, and the second time through it, we didn't have lyrics. But at least musically, it seems to be. I still get another wavy vibe, much like Middle Class and Poverty. I mean, this is just like the high reverb, the high reverb, proggy rock stuff that, like I said, Casey obviously has an influence of. But it feels basically in the high energy sections. There's a lot of voices going on, both instrumental voices. We have the choir, not the choir, the layered harmony vocals, and then Casey's singular vocal and how they sort of interweave in each other, creating just one of the best melodies I think I've ever heard with counterpoint to it. Just a gorgeous section right there. But there's a lot of stuff going on. This person is surrounded by a lot of stuff. Not just random noises and excitement and stuff like that, but also more voices like him. But when we get to the darker part, it's very quiet, isolating. The cool rhythmic stuff that we heard at the beginning from the auxiliary percussion is here, but pushed way out to the side. Sounds like it's behind me. It's quiet and distant. There's nothing really here except the main vocalist, whoever, whatever character they're embodying. It's lonely. I'm curious where this is going to get taken lyrically. There's definitely two ways to explore the loneliness of a law enforcer. And we'll have to see what's going on there when we get there. But I do like this duality present here and in Middle Class. We didn't have duality in Poverty, Industry, or LoTown. They were pretty much what they were at the beginning. You hear the first few notes and you know what kind of time you're in for. And Middle Class subverts that, and Patrol certainly subverts it twice. As I mentioned, Middle Class moves from one side to the other, showcasing a darkness underneath the surface, underneath the mask. This is a duality of self. This isn't just something that we hear later. This is a constant back and forth between the bright poppiness and the serene introspection. Yeah. One thing I do want to bring up is the instrumentation. I know I talked about this at the beginning. I love the way that these songs are crafted. There's so many instruments, so many different timbres at play. They all are typically creating fun stuff to listen to, aside from a couple of more somber moments. A lot of it is bouncier, dancier, poppier, fun, catchy. It is really great writing in a way that sounds great to my ears. I called it, going into a candy store for my ears earlier, whatever that means. And it's still true here, 5/8 of the way through the album, and I'm still looking for it. What's the next song gonna do? What's the next section gonna do? Where's that next ornamental bit going? It's just keeping me on my toes in the most delightful way. I I wish I had checked this out in 2022, but I held off on it because we were getting an album reaction soon, and soon ended up being like a year and a half later or something. Um, which is a bit unfortunate, but this certainly would have ended up in my favorite albums of 2022, I think, even without having heard the last three songs. There's still 20 minutes of music left, and I'm confident that I'm going to enjoy them. That's how much I just absolutely love Casey's arrangements, and composition. It's good, better than good, but I just I like the word good. A lot of people feel like it constitutes middle of the road. It's not bad, but it's not great. It's not perfect or awesome. Like there's a lot of things better, but I think good delineates a very specific quality of positivity that tends to elevate. It is good, especially when you say it like that. It's good. This is good stuff. I don't know where I'm going with that. Um, but there are a lot of times on the channel I see something's good and then I'll backtrack and be like, "No, it's great. It was fantastic." And I feel like I need to oversell it, but I think good is like just a really strong positive word, even though I think a majority of people read it as middle of the road. But aside from just the instrumentation on this, I do want to introduce a concept that I'm hearing. There's no virtual instruments on this. That might not be entirely true. Virtual instrument libraries have come a long way, and there's definitely some that feel very real, especially when we look at percussion instruments. There's actually some really good string and air-based instruments, aerophones as well, but those tend to be harder to capture some of the nuances of it. What I'm hearing in this album, though, is a lot of nuanced performance, in that I think every instrument is played. And there's got to be like 30 or 40 different instruments outside of the basic rock setup in this album. I'm curious if anybody knows the answer to this, how much of this is digital and how much of it is live recorded. I would love to hear that everything is recorded live with real instruments, even if they doesn't go live with it. I'm fine with it being a backing track while, the 4-piece band or 5-piece band or whatever plays on top of that. Or maybe they carry, like an auxiliary percussion set with them, maybe a marimba. I don't see them touring with the trumpet and the sax and the tuba and the whole string section, all that. But I would like to hear that the whole thing, at least on the studio recording, was done live. And if it's not, that's just going to blow my mind, because there's so many moments in here where I'm like, wow, that was done with a library. Like, just I'm 95% certain almost all this was recorded live. So like that would blow me away. I'm going to read some lyrics on this and then we'll push forward. And some of my thoughts that I had are confirmed in this track's lyrics. It is about a patrolman, also a police, a law enforcer, whatever you want to call them. I really like the opening verse. Says, they see me strolling in my uniform, acting like they've seen a ghost. Wish I could tell them that I mean no harm. I wouldn't want to lose my post. It says it's risky returning to my stomping ground after giving him a guarantee that I'd never do anything so profound as become the enemy. He used to have solidarity with whatever ring he came from. Now he presides power over that ring. He's wary about heading back to where he grew up because he's going to get chastised for it from his old friends. But I like this opening. It says, I wish I could tell him I mean no harm. I wouldn't want to lose my post. This is really important. It sets up a lot of the key elements that come in later in the track after some of the darkness sets in. But the pre-chorus mentions what I thought it might based on some of the lines I picked up earlier during the actual reaction. Says, I used to be weak. I used to let my life get the best of me. All I needed, though, was a little bit of power. Power! So yeah, that's it. He thinks he's powerful now. That makes him better, just like the ruler. Just like the God Emperor in the tower. He's got power, and he's awesome, right? Now I have power. So I must also be awesome. Verse 2 shows a little bit of transformation. Though verse 1 says, I wish I could tell him I'm not going to do anything. I'm just here to make sure that, I make sure everyone's following the law. That's it. Verse 2, though, says it would be difficult to find something in mind we couldn't do. To anyone who gives us as much as a dirty look, don't make it you. There's intimidation in this. You give me a dirty look, I can do whatever I want. There are no rules to what I'm allowed to do. This is very different from I'm just gentle, I'm here to keep the peace, to you look at me wrong, I'm going to mess you up. The pre-chorus also shifts here just a little bit. It says, used to let our lives keep us in the weeds. We were given a choice and it was easy to see what we needed. Still kind of the same idea, but the first time was let life get the best of me. Kind of beat me down. This one is keeping us in the weeds, keeping us down. Our life didn't just put us down, it kept us there. Everything's pushed to an extreme by this point of the song lyrically. The chorus says, we don't have to think about a thing. We can bring you all to your knees. We can keep you from forgetting. We've got the power to get away with anything over and over again. Yeah, it's about a corrupt police force. The bridge, which is the first time that we enter into the heavier section of the track, talks about having worked for many days straight and is more of a powder keg than anything else. It says 3 days straight seeing monochrome, everything's in black and white. You're either right or you're wrong. And we're always right. So if you're not with us, you're against us. Seeing monochrome. Fuse is used, ready to blow, called on to be vicious, callous, and expeditious. Well, I can't tell you when I last slept, and though my conscience is a bit unkempt, well, it's no bother. I can just forget and never bother with a bit of it again. I think this is interesting because just in the previous chorus, he mentioned that he can make sure the populace doesn't forget the kind of power they have. But here, he speaks about some sort of substance abuse, maybe alcohol, that allows him to forget that his conscience is a bit untangled. He's not the same person he was on day one. We reach the final chorus, and it says, if my morals seem a bit mislaid, it might be easy to forget that if I ever tried to disobey, you'd probably find me dead. This is also during a low introspective part, and I think it is much like the second part of Middle Class, a remembrance of his place. He does have this power over some classes, but he's also still just a cog in the God Emperor's wheel of machinery. You know what I'm saying. He's not powerful. He's been given a little bit over specific groups, but if he steps out of line, he's dead too. I really like this annotation here. I've completely forgot about this until they brought it up. This is one thing that I probably realized if I was listening to it with the lyrics pulled up. But the end of that line, if I ever tried to disobey, you're probably going to find me dead. And then the song cuts out. And then out of nowhere, we get power. And we bring back into our final chorus. And it's like the 0 to 100 feeling, right? But it's the idea of moving from this realization of like, oh, geez, I'm just a cog in the machine too. None of this power is real. And then he just forgets about it because he has all this power. And it's this coping mechanism. I'm powerful. I don't have to worry about that. He even says earlier, I can just forget and never bother with that bit of it again. Yeah. And like even I was talking about the bouncing back and forth of the vocals where we had the choir or like the multiple vocalists harmonizing, and then we had Casey's like singular voice. I think they were all Casey actually. And like his singular voice would come in, and then this other group would come in and harmonize, and then that group would start their own line, and then he'd start his own line, then come back together. And what I really like about this is that it sort of reinforces this singularity. That at least when he is in this patrolman outfit, he is one of many. I think it's a really important part not to use different vocalists for that section, but to triple and quadruple track Casey himself so that all the vocals sort of line up together timbre wise. It is a monotony, a group of one. Kind of symbolizes their distinctiveness pushed aside from other classes. They are their own thing. All for one and one for all kind of idea. Yeah. All right. 3 rings to go. Next is our longest one with Luxury. Then we have a short track at Nature. I think it'll be interesting if Nature's just an instrumental. Oh, but it's not. So I wonder who sings Nature then, if there's people in the Nature ring. And then we get Tower, which I'm pretty sure is going to be told from the God Emperor's perspective. Alright, let's dive into Luxury, ring number 3.
We can choose. We can make moves no matter what they lose. We can be
very
right,
shrill.
We can be wrong. We can make mistakes. Our reign is long. Cause gentlemen, I believe everything happens for reasons. Just look at the seasons. And here we've been divine, roots entrenched in time-honored traditions, which we all can malign. We have the rest.
So like a 6/8. I think this is one of the first times we've explored a non-4/4 outside of Poverty, which places it in parallel opposition to Luxury. Wow. And see, there's a lot of darkness in here too. Unless that coloring of the chord progression is supposed to indicate the darkness of the group.
die. You can't lose your damn mind. You're in the hall of the guys. Win or lose, it's alright. You're in the hall of the guys.
It's interesting also because we're in 6/8, but the beginning of this section is an 8-beat phrase from the vocals, so it gets disjointed against the beat. It's out of sync with the song.
That nothing ever changes. Sure, bring them in with a lie. We could always use another tithe, and time will pass, and time will pass, and time will pass.
Sound passe when you're living in a paradise, the kind of place where you never have to work a day, passing the time with what you crave, 'cause you know anything you need can be provided when you want it. We want a lot, so they gotta give. Could you fear for with walls as high as these? If you can't see beyond your windows, it's hard to find the room to care for or anything, but we want it all. And if they got something to give, gonna give it all if they still got the will to live.
Oh, the lyrics are so dark. And it's put to like this most beautiful, serene music.
Something left to give. They gotta give
trying to figure out what all of this represents, looking at the duality of many of the last couple of tracks. This is sort of the inverse of how they are. I'll talk about it later. Such a sarcastic take on the whole thing. No way. All right. That was a blast. And I think I got it now. It's funny. The Cupid shuffle bit at the end where they tell you how to move so everyone can move alongside it. That's what solidified everything for me. If it wasn't for that, I don't know that I'd have a strong understanding of what this track's doing. So here's the thing, right? Much like Patrol and Middle Class, this song split in two. It shows a duality of this ring. The opening half is anger, animosity, darkness. At least to me, is the negativity that those in the luxury class feel towards everyone else below them. All of their concerns that they've had to listen to, them whining and complaining about how bad life is. It's a bit overdone. It's supposed to feel comically dastardly, like some sort of superhero comic book villain kind of deal. Interestingly, much as Patrol introduced us to the idea of viewing the world monochromatically, I think that is a very black and white view of them. It's why I really like the back end of this track as a juxtaposition to it, because I don't like the idea of saying, look at all the nuance in the rings below. We get up to the luxury one and they're mustache twirling villains. We're going to take everything we want and they can't do anything about it. That's sort of what the opening 4 minutes of Luxury feels like. It's so on the nose. They're so comically aggressive and lacking total empathy, any grain of empathy for the rings below them. That it almost feels out of place against the nuance it's been taken with all the other rings of Antimai. And so I like where the back end goes then. We replace all of the textural and percussive elements of the beginning, the snarly, gritty, raspy vocal style, in favor for a beach party. We got some nice offbeat hits. We have bright wooden bells. We have a ukulele or some sort of acoustic strummed instrument, very bright sounding throughout all of this. It's very fun. It's very laid back. Hey, grab a margarita and a pina colada and, let's chill. Let's play some volleyball or whatever. The lyrics are still dark here, but the vibe is different. And I think this shows a really interesting part because there probably is a part of the luxury class. Maybe it's a small percentage of it. Maybe it's just a portion of everybody who just really hates everyone below them and wishes the worst on them. But honestly, the luxury of being the luxury class is not having to care about anything. It's the truth of the middle class, where they stick their heads in the sand and pretend there's nothing to do, and they sort of wander around aimlessly, accepting that boredom to being a part of their life. The luxury class actually get to do whatever they want and get to ignore everything, but there's no boredom to it. It's a life of luxury, of excess, of doing whatever you want. It isn't just being well off, it's being well off enough to not care about anything. And so when we get to the end of the song, and we have that quasi Cupid slide bit going on, I'm like, this is a dance party. We got a DJ, we got people chilling and relaxing. It's upbeat, it's vibrant. I was trying to figure out what the whole vibe was, but it's a party. And that's the purpose of it. There probably is some conniving, some dark deals being done, but that's a portion of the time, and that's what makes it sting more. It's not just that the lower class are worse off than the luxury class. It isn't just that the luxury class outright hates them and actively tries to make their lives worse. It's that they spend so little time doing it, and yet it's as effective as it is. Of their song, they spend about 25-30% of it singing about how much they like screwing over the rings below them, and then they take 60% of it to celebrate and dance and party and forget about the choices they've made that affect the patrol class, the middle class, LoTown industry, and the poverty outside the city. That's why luxury works. This track, because it doesn't just show them as the villains they are, but it also shows just how little they need to do anything in order to make everyone's lives so bad. They're not working day and night like everyone else to screw everyone over. It's sort of just an afterthought. I woke up and, the middle class upset me, so here, y'all do this. It's really going to screw them over today. And that's the end of my scheming. I have the rest of my day ahead of me to do whatever I want, to live in happiness. It's that nonchalant element that makes it sting the most, and I think Casey captures that very well. Our suffering isn't just an afterthought, but the choices that lead to it are just as much an afterthought. I wrote something down here. Poverty is in 7-8. Everything else between poverty and luxury is, from what I remember, in 4-4, and luxury is in 6-8. My idea initially was that poverty was missing one thing to get them inside the wall. That's true. If they had that one extra beat, they would be 8-8 instead of 7-8, and 8-8 is 4-4. They would be metrically in line with the industry, the LoTown, the middle class, and the patrol class. Luxury separates themselves one step further. We're too good for 4-4, but we're not missing anything. We're still an even number. We're 6-8, and 6-8 is actually a really chill vibe. I've mentioned in the past a few times that 6/8 feels similar to 3/4, which is a waltz, or can be portrayed as a waltz if you emphasize beat 1 and not 2 and 3. Bum 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 ba da 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 dum bum bum bum. It's very flowy. Dum bum 1 2 3 1 2 3, and it's effortless. It's chill. It's relaxed. That's what this song comes off as. I really love that. I don't know if that was done intentionally. For all I know, like I said, I believe most of Casey's decisions are quite intentional. This one, I almost feel like I'm grasping at straws at, though. It is a pattern. If it's an intentional pattern, if it has meaning, I don't know. But I'm seeing meaning in it. I think it's interesting that the luxury ring is the first time we have a time signature that's different from everyone else's, and it's also the one song that feels different from everyone else. The patrol, the middle class, the LoTown, the industry class, they all have the same message. Yeah, it sucks here, but it could be worse. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is chord colorings. I mentioned at the beginning of the album that I wasn't a big fan of the fact that it was so bright and poppy and dancey and yet lyrically dark. But I think Casey's actually making a different point here, utilizing the chord colorings or the feeling of the song in order to express something different than the narrative tone. I had leaned into this thought early on, and I think it's beginning to get confirmed that the darker the chord coloring or the more negative the song feels is a reflection of that ring's heart. In that the middle class, LoTown, industry, and poverty class are all relatively positive groups of people. They're not doing too much to hurt those below them. They're just trying to survive for the most part. The middle class is the first time that we see a type of, not necessarily negligence or negativity, but an ambivalence to those below them. They recognize there's poverty issues. They recognize there's an imbalance in classes, but they stick their heads in the sand and ignore it. They're not bad people, but they're certainly not good either. Patrol shows an active disgust towards those below him, and Luxury shows more of that, not just wanting to hurt those in lower rings, but actively making decisions that will. It shows a darkness of character, and the music reflects that. I think that's what Casey's going for on this. So, my guess then is Nature is probably going to be a bit brighter depending on what it's about. I figured it would be an instrumental about a ring of the city that's devoted to natural resources, trees and grass and plants and stuff. Judging by the album art, there isn't much else out there, so it would be pretty cool to see that. Probably talk about the beauty of it. And then Ring 1 Tower will be the darkest song on the track, as it's the God Emperor. It's the person who rules Antimai. And so I do take back my original concern earlier. The very surface level to say, oh, the narrative's going in this direction and the music isn't. There's some dissonance there. But Casey had another task in mind for the emotional resonance of the music, one that wouldn't show its head until later. But I do like how the song how the album ends up getting color graded from brighter sounds at the beginning for the most impoverished to darker tones at the end to those at the top of the ring. Very cool idea there. So let's hit some lyrics. Alright, I was a little off on my read of this, but I'm not entirely sure that what I pulled out of it was incorrect. It just had the wrong basis for it. The two sides of this song are not two sides of the luxurious group, it's actually two distinct groups of luxurious people. The first is those who rule by political power. It's called the Hall of the Guides. It's the lawmakers. It's the political side of things. They look at all the issues within the city and make choices. Like verse 2 says, a man was dying, a child was born. Yes, following form, we will pick his carcass clean, but first, there is one thing on which we must agree. On the one hand, we can starve the new child. On the other hand, we can let the elder die. How to keep the flow of food to hungry mouths. So they're met with this dilemma. Somebody's dying, there's a child coming in, and we don't have food for both of them. What do we do? And one of the most powerful lines that I think I've heard in this track, primarily because this album is filled with powerful lyrics that veer from the uncouth. That is to say, there's no swearing on the album. Up until here. And Casey decides that the guides need to drop the F-bomb, and it makes it exceptionally powerful. So he says, how to keep the flow of food to hungry mouths? On second thought, fuck it, they'll figure it out. It's like, they don't even care, and Casey wants you to know that they don't care. To like the utmost degree. It wasn't even like, I need to write a flowery way to showcase their lack of care for those below them. He's like, no, it's going to be done through language, not through description. I'm going to show you that they don't care. And so it ends up being a very visceral part of the song. It caught me off guard, primarily because there was absolutely zero expectation for it. And it comes out hitting hard because of that. Absolutely love the restraint in order to allow this moment to deliver. Now, it talks about how these judges, whatever they are, the guides, they really can't do any wrong, much like how the police force can do whatever they want and get away with it within reason. They can't start a rebellion after all. The guides, they can do whatever they want. Chorus says, you can lose your mind here in the Hall of the Guides. Win or lose, it's all right, because you're in the Hall of the Guides. Verse 3 begins to look at disdain. They talk of famine. They talk of drought. They should be happy anyone's hearing them out. That kind of animosity is felt through a lot of this opening bit. And the outro, of course, says, will persist and endure and maintain the status quo. They'll resist, but will assure that nothing ever changes. Now, something here is interesting. It says, we'll bring them in with a lie. We can always use another tithe. The idea that we do invite people into the city, based on a lie entirely. It says we could use another tithe. This can be from a couple perspectives. One would be like religious tithing, like in the Christian church, which is a monetary thing. We need more money in here, so we'll invite people to work and get money and spend it. But there's also the other way of looking at it as that it's a payment of sorts. Doesn't necessarily need to be monetary, and Antimai works on human labor. The tithe could be the body. You bring people in to work. However, the thing is, we'll bring them in with a lie, and the annotation brings up an interesting idea. Is the indigo child real? Or is it a lie that the guides have made up to appease the lower class? Not necessarily to appease them, to placate them. Much like in a similar vein, it is hypothesized that the Romans may have written the New Testament to the Bible to placate, man, I'm a bit rusty. Who were they trying to call? Was it the Christians in the Roman Empire? Because a lot of the Old Testament is blood and gore and just an angry, wrathful God killing his creations and humans killing each other. It was just a gnarly testament. Then the New Testament is like, love your neighbor, turn the other cheek. Jesus comes in with a very different message than God did. And I remember seeing at one point in time, somebody was trying to prove that it was written by the Romans to give, to placate an upset portion of the Roman Empire and to give them some ideals about being less rowdy to live up to or something along those lines. It's been a long time since I read that. That was back in, was it high school, college that I learned about that? I can't remember the name of the guy who was trying to push that narrative. But it kind of reminds me of that. You create this mythology to calm people down. You don't need to worry about things. You don't need to fight for things to get better. If you're not in a good place, just pray. The indigo child will take care of you. He'll come eventually. Even going back to the credits of Indigo Child and a little bit of the reprise from, the album we didn't listen to today. The Indigo Child left because he wasn't happy, or she was. I don't remember if they. Anyways, the child wasn't happy with the way things were praising. People were praising him or her, it. And so the Indigo Child said, "I'll come back again later, but continue to pray." It's the idea of later. It's like the rapture in Christian mythology. Just keep being good because later I'll have my second coming. Later is like forever down the road. It's never gonna happen. But keep being good. Don't cause too much trouble. Keep the prayers up, and I'll be back sometime in the future to collect all of y'all. You know, this does sort of align with that, and so this hadn't crossed my mind at all. So I'm really thankful for this annotation here. Is this what's going on? Is this their way of keeping Antimai quiet and under control? Those who they can't control physically, they control spiritually. I don't know. Part two of this, though, is called Cream of the Crop, and this is those who are financially in power, the rich, who don't have to do anything and presumably are friends with the guides. So if is anything that they need law-wise, they can just make a donation to the funds, to the campaign, and get a law passed that works for them, that kind of thing. But it's all about living carefree lives. Waking in bliss might sound passé when you're living in a paradise, this kind of place where you can never have to work a day, passing the time with whatever you crave. I really like the parallels this draws to Middle Class, which is also a song about passing the time, but sort of being bored in it. Not really a lot to do. You still have your day job to do, and then after that, it's just like time passing, I believe is the line from that. In this one, it talks about doing whatever you want to pass the time. The time doesn't pass you by, you pass it by. It's a very different perspective on living. He says, because anything you need can be provided whenever you want it. And we want a lot, so they're going to give it. So, yeah, definitely the few rich who have everything taking what little there is from the poor because they want that too, and they deserve it, don't they? All the hard work they do. Talks about how difficult it is to see any of the problems. Can't really see that far beyond your window with how high the walls are, so what's there to worry about? Says it's hard to find the room to care for anything, right? But we want it all, and if they've got something to give, they're gonna give it to us, because if they want to live, they'll have to. And that was a really dark line. What is it? What is the exact wording here? But we want it all, and if they've got something to give, they're going to give it all if they still got the will to live. Just, wow. It's just as menacing as the guides. saying, whatever, they'll figure it out. We're just gonna take the day off. Like it's that same level of animosity to it, but it's said gentler. Gentler? Gentler. There's less animosity, less darkness in the delivery, even though the words themselves have that same bite. The chorus says there'll always be cream on the crop, and we're never going to get off the top. We're the pick of the litter, the chosen righteous few who have come prepared with what they've inherited. What have you? Yeah. We've earned all this, of course. We're the chosen few by the God Emperor himself. It's been ordained for us to be in this position, but what have you got? You have nothing. You're going to tell me you were born for that? Y'all are just lazy. That's the vibe I get from this. Their laziness was earned by divine rights, and everybody else's laziness is a product of their own shortcomings. They even chuckle. Those below us, they'll save for their whole lives, so that one day, just one day in the future, they can live like we do every day. And they'll be able to see how sweet life could have been, but they'll have to return back to where they came from. It's just like, The outro, though, I'm still not sure what's going on here. To me, it's still just like, hey, let's make a Cupid shuffle for the song. Left, right, slide to the back, hop to the right, now kick and clap. Hands to the sky and shake of the knees. But it prays in his number XCV. I wonder what that's supposed to be. It mentions in the annotation that there are rituals and exercises they must perform to ensure their spot in society, praising the God Emperor. And yeah, praising his name, XCV, that makes sense. Praising the God Emperor, but like the rest of the dance seems superfluous. Maybe the God Emperor is just that petty and he's made a dance for himself, but that makes him feel more like Kuzco than anything else. Is that the second time I've referenced a Disney film today? Casey, bring out the Disney in my musical analysis. I appreciate it. But yeah, for those who haven't seen Emperor's New Groove, go watch it. It's hilarious. David Spade and John Goodman, and a king gets turned into a demon llama. It's hilarious. Just go watch it. Anyways, though, Kuzco is just like this very flippant ruler. He's young and vain, and he likes big statues of himself and dance numbers and all this stuff. And like, none of it really feels like what a villainous ruler would do, and that's sort of what this feels like. Like, praise in his number, yeah. I expect a ruler to be vain, wanting people to praise his name, but to like tie that to a dance routine, a la a Cupid slide, but for praising the God Emperor, feels cartoonishly comedic. It feels way overblown for the type of image I kind of have for this guy, which like God Emperor, I'm thinking of like Warhammer 40K Space Marine style stuff. Real fascist a view of like it's all in the name. Like nobody just calls themselves the God Emperor. That's a very specific title a ruler gives to themselves because they're trying to sound big and badass, right? And then they're like, also, y'all need to dance to praise me. It's just, the image isn't lining up. So I'm kind of curious what kind of characterization we're going to get out of the tower track when we do have the God Emperor. Unless this is just supposed to be metaphorical. Like all these dance moves are a metaphor for the hoops that the luxury class have to dance through in order to keep their wealth and power. Maybe. Maybe. Everything else has been pretty on the nose. The metaphor stuff has been social commentary more than metaphor about, the people themselves, the world of Antimai. Okay. Here we go. Forest. Nature. Ring number 2. I also think that's pretty cool. That the lawmakers and the capitalist people in power still aren't as close to the God Emperor. It gets more ridiculous every time I say it. It becomes more comically absurd. But they're not as close to him as nature is. He still puts up a wall, multiple walls actually, 2 stone walls and then a wall of nature between him and the next human level. That speaks a lot about the whole setup here. And actually puts an interesting twist on it, because if we're going to do parallels here between the real world, the God Emperor would be a type of Illuminati class. Someone behind the curtains pulling the strings of the politicians and the CEOs and the capitalists and all that stuff. The warmongers. Hadn't considered that prior. Alright, let's dive into this. Checking out nature. Let's kick it. Oh, this is the shortest track too. Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. It still kind of has those beachy vibes from Luxury.
There was no one to meddle, just the wind to help us settle. We were drinking from the
I also hear how streamlined this is.
to the earth. We were thriving undisturbed.
We have a very fast shaker, 2 guitars, the bass and drums,
Then there arose those intent on moving,
and the vocals. Very stripped down, feels more like indie,
and like a miracle,
more like indie rock than anything else. What is that sound?
man changed.
Oh, and the bells.
The fin begat the fist, strength enough to subsist. Something changed in them when they heard I am. Our unbroken pact was now illusory. So still we have to be, while waiting endlessly for what is unforeseen.
That's a fun little transition. Oh, it's not a transition.
Time passed and they continued growing in the vacuum of their unknowing.
So there's a really nice back and forth here between the vocals
They were changing,
and the,
taking much more
oh,
than
of course, and the bells.
envy, the perfect sea. Something changed in them when they heard I am. Our unbroken pact was now illusory. So still we have to be, while waiting endlessly for what is unforeseen.
Okay.
The fist begets the stick, and the stick begets the blade.
So it's I figured nature was going to be straightforward, but there's a darkness to this track too that's falling in line with the duality we've been exploring in the last couple of tracks.
Worries, just laughter, 'cause we'll be hereafter.
very haunting having the extra vocals on the outside. Yeah, beautiful track. I can't wait to get into the lyrics because I'm curious who the perspective is. Is this somehow a personification of nature? I mean, the final bits of that is no worries, just laughter, because we'll be hereafter, which is accurate. It doesn't matter what kind of damage humanity does to themselves or the planet. Eventually, they'll die out and the planet will continue on. The planet's pretty good at repairing itself. And assuming it is Earth, I think I can apply this to that as well. Nature is right. It'll be here after us. Doesn't matter when that is. But I'm also extrapolating from a single line at the end of a track. So I want to get into the lyrics and see what's going on there. I will say a couple of themes I picked up on, though, is we do have another layer of duality here. The ending is a bit darker than the beginning, which is very free, carefree, bouncy, chill, but it's also streamlined. As I mentioned, there's not a lot of instruments. There's still more than just a rock band, but compared to some of the other tracks we've listened to that get quite ornamental, it's kind of stripped down, just seven or eight instruments. Getting tongue-tied 3 hours into this. Also, I'm getting like dry mouth. I don't know. You might have seen me drinking water a lot more often. I'm trying to combat that. I've never had that happen during a video before. But yeah, there's not a lot of instrumentation here, which simplifies it. And the way that I view this is that humanity is complex, but nature isn't. Nature is actually pretty understandable. It's simple, comparatively. And another thing that I see in the music is cycle. It's give and take. A lot of what we've explored so far is a lot of taking. Those at the top of the ring take from the bottom of the ring, and there is this push upward. All the resources go upward, and everybody at the bottom is left to deal with it. And there's this animosity, this conflict between different layers. It's not an ecosystem that works for everything. It is an ecosystem that helps those at the top. There's something kind of not natural about that. And so nature explores a musical style where everything works together, not like a machine, like an industry where we have a bunch of little ideas that all come together to create a song. But this one is about a give and take. I'll do a line, then you do a line. I'll do a line, you do a line. Casey sings something, the guitar comes in after it. Or the bells. It's really all about giving everything a little bit of equal time. It's simple, but it's balanced. Everything gets a chance to handle its role, and that role is sometimes a relationship with another element. The bell part kind of would work on its own, but it really works best in juxtaposition to the vocals when you get that baton pass. They call and response from it. Otherwise, you just get response, and then that doesn't always make sense. Like listening to one half of a conversation. And so there is this really nice reliance on everything in this track. Everything relies on something else to come together in a way that feels organic and not machine-like. I wish I could put it into better words because a lot of the ways I'm describing this probably could relate to the concept of a cog in a machine and describe industry. But I feel this differently in this track. And I don't know that I have the words to express that, but I hope maybe you felt that and didn't know you felt it, and maybe I've unlocked that feeling for you, even though maybe you also can't put it into words. There's a word I want, I just can't think of what it is. I think it would really unlock a lot of what I'm trying to get at here. But it just feels like organic growth, where everything's working in tandem in a way that benefits everything. That's the main thing. Industry, everything works in tandem to appease something larger than itself. Here, everything's working in tandem to appease the little things that are working in tandem. If that makes any sense. But yeah, just everything about this song seems to do an excellent job at characterizing and personifying nature into a musical format, whether it's the sheer simplicity of it or the ways that things work together in nature. They're complementary. And it's also a 4/4 track, which is interesting because unlike Luxury, which sets itself apart from everyone else, nature aligns itself with the other lower classes. I don't know if that means something, but we are back to 4/4 after our momentary lapse in the Luxury ring. Let me hit some lyrics, see what's going on there, and then we'll move on to our final ring. Alright, so this track is told from the perspective of plants in ring 2. The Genius annotation provides a bit of extra information that the song itself does not, stating that ring 2 is comprised of whatever is left of the nature that once graced their earth. As they grew scarce in the world, all sorts of plants were stored in this ring as a greenhouse. As time passed, the luxurious people from ring 3 began stealing plants since they became a symbol of status due to their scarcity. If that isn't strong symbology, I don't know. Symbolism. What does symbology mean? If that's not strong symbolism, I don't know what is. About the rich and powerful stealing parts of the earth to showcase. Man, I wish part of that would have been put into the song, because if not for the annotation, I would never know that. There's obviously some supplemental information, maybe a booklet, maybe it's in the album liner, I don't know, where some of this information is stored, and I would love to... Oh, you know, it might be in that short story too. Anyways, in time, the collective consciousness that is nature was able to take over the ring to fight off these thieves, and now it's an area completely locked off, serving as a living moat to the tower. That's pretty cool. So the story here predates Antimai. It talks about pre-human times and the growth of human. It says, at first there was no one to meddle, just the wind to help us settle. We were drinking from the heavens, digging down into the earth. We were thriving undisturbed. Then there arose those intent on moving, and like a miracle they kept improving. Then change begat the tail, begat the fin, begat the fist, strength enough to subsist. Talking about evolution here, where organisms from the sea eventually grew a tail, grew fins, began moving, evolved to grow fists, and we, humanity, early humanity had evolved at this point. The chorus says, something changed when they heard I am. And that really is a powerful statement. It is a call to understand not just that I exist, but what existence is. That's one of the big philosophical things that helps differentiate us from most animals. And it's so powerful a phrase that nature realized something changed. There was a catastrophic shift in the way that the world moved once humans realized what they are. It says, our unbroken pact was now illusory. So still we have to be while waiting endlessly for what is unforeseen. I think what this means is that they just have to sit here and wait out the destruction of humans, which is something they kind of lean into a little bit later. Verse 2 speaks about how envy became the perfect seed, something that can grow unlike anything else. It's true. Wanting what someone else has, the greed of wanting it all. The bridge says the fist begets the stick, and the stick begets the blade begets the bullet, and the bullet begets the bomb. Our evolution now is one of destruction, not one of existence. Where at first we fought to simply be, now we strive and improve to remove those around us. Lines up with envy and greed. We want more of the planet to ourselves. And so the outro, no worries, just laughter. Because we'll be here after. They're going to kill themselves in the end. Humanity's going to wipe themselves out one way or another. And I had the correct call with what the outro was pointing towards. So yeah, it's from the perspective of nature. I think musically it does a good job of personifying nature. And I think it's interesting that unlike most of the other tracks here, it's not too fixated on the here and now, whether that means this specific moment or just, since Antimai was around, however recent that may be, but it goes back to the beginning of time. It's actually not about Antimai at all. It's not even about the plants in Antimai in the second ring. It's just a song about the earth and its reluctance to give in regardless of how badly we want to destroy it. Alrighty. The last track. Am I ready for this album to end? I don't think so. I'm enjoying myself too much. But all good things come to an end. We're at the final ring. The Tower of the God Emperor. Oh my jeez, talk about a title that compensates. Alright, let's kick it. I really hope this isn't the God Emperor singing. Although I guess Casey wasn't going to change his voice too much for it.
That's too much power for one man.
The double octave below thing that's so common in popular pop music today. This is too good. Man, when we get dancier stuff like this, I need a full body cam. There's so much movement going on that's like below the chest. Dude, that Barry sax works so well in there, just to sell the power of that section.
Why do you feel your world is safe? I was bred behind a barricade. One by one we must accept our fate. Mine was rising up to dominate. And who was the first to make all the world as water to any reply we tried, unable to change their violence and took control. Why would the emperor need no clothes if he keeps the people in disposed?
Oh man,
They even get to see
such a filthy moment of the album. Those trumpets are killing it.
praise his name. Oh, so lucky you get to live beneath him. Life is a dream, oh, life is a dream. Life is a dream, oh, life is a dream. And you're in mine. Yeah, you're in mine. But oh, what a nightmare. I could provide you me on a bed,
It's such a smooth track.
you in a bad way, and without a warning, I'll put you in mourning when the light in you dims down. I'll blot the sun out. While the emperor's sin repose of the people
Okay.
facts or fiction if you've never seen. The world is only made more insane when the helpless many praise the names of the very ones who want us stuck beneath
Yeah. Huh? Okay, so I had some thoughts about that, and it kind of blowed up. Blew up is the proper way for that, but down here in the south, things blowed up. Ah, jeez. So I was going to talk about how that final chord isn't a full resolution. It doesn't provide an ending to the song, much less to the album. In fact, leading into it, we didn't really go in any direction that feels like we were going to complete an idea. We just kept looping on a cycle, and that's how we ended it. We were in the middle of a cycle pointing towards another chord. Maybe to the beginning of the phrase, once again, going back to the beginning of the progression, or leading us to the resolution to the progression. But we just didn't get there. We hung on the not dissonance, but the tension of the leading tone, and then it just peters out. To me, that says we're not done. Like, this is the end of Act 1. Because, the short film is called Prologue Ring 8 or something like that. So I kind of view that as like a teaser or a prologue. This is Act 1. It makes sense that it concludes the album in a way without concluding the story. That's what the ending tells me. There's still more to tell. This is just the end of this right here. It's quasi finished. It doesn't quite feel like it's done. There's more to say, but it's closed off enough to wrap this up. But then, like, we just have this tone that ends abruptly. It doesn't even fade out naturally. It just runs up to the end of the playtime and then just cuts off. And that makes me wonder if the next album is actually going to connect to this track. I think that would be pretty cool. I don't know if that's how it's going to be, but I think that'd be pretty cool. There are very few albums I can think of where two albums actually connect back to back with ideas. And one of them that I can think of, which is Periphery's Juggernaut, Alpha to Juggernaut Omega. It's a 2-disc set that came out at different times. They're only kind of connected. It's more of a thematic connection than literally picking up where the last one left off. There's a fade out at the end of Alpha and a fade in at the beginning of Omega. So maybe that one doesn't even quite work. The other one I can think of is Jack Off Jill with... I can't even think of the albums. It's been a long time since I listened to this group. Oh yeah, Clear Hearts, Gray Flowers, and Sexless Demons and Scars. Um, Sexless Demons ends with a piano riff that Clear Hearts picks up. But they're not conceptual albums. It was just a cool little nod, I guess. So that might be the only album I can think of that has a direct pickup from a previous one. So it'd be pretty cool if Casey did that. But I do find that abrupt cutoff a bit strange in isolation. And without having the next CD out, you just have to live with that abrupt cutoff. Theme. This is really what I've been exploring most on this track because a lot of the composition is fairly similar. It's all very dense, lots of ornamental ideas, interesting chord progressions and harmonic devices going through. This is not typical rock music, but it's not classical and it's not jazz and it's not pop. It's just a little bit of everything tossed together and something that feels very much the Deer Hunter. With gorgeous, catchy melodies on top of it. That tends to be the way that I would describe most of these tracks, and this one doesn't disappoint on that. It fits in those ideas very well. And so what really differs from song to song is theme. What is it exploring? And this one is very bright and poppy. It has a little bit of darkness to it. It to me, feels like a combination of industry and poverty. Maybe that's just me. Let me know your opinion on that. That might be a bit of a hot take right there. But I do hear a lot of both of those in this track. And I really didn't know how to read it. It's very dancey. And honestly, given that this is the God Emperor, let me double check this. Because before I say this, I want to make sure. Ring 1 is the centerpiece of Antimai, the tower, an immensely tall structure. It's a sight to behold for any and all who see it from any of the other rings, as it literally towers over the entire city, representing the enormous gap of power between he who resides in the tower and everyone else. The tower is home to the God Emperor of Antimai, currently XCV, praise in his number. From there he reigns supreme, and his word is law. Alright, without reading the lyrics yet, I did see a couple of I's and me's in there. I'm going to assume this is sung from the perspective of the God Emperor. And a dude with that name singing this quasi show tune, so it's something that I could hear in a musical theater, right? I'm just imagining him doing these like very intricate dances to it, right? But given that his name's the God Emperor, all I can imagine is like Lord Darkhelmet dancing to stuff like this, trying to look macho while also this music. It kind of goes against that toxic masculinity, machismo stuff that the God Emperor represents. And it's just the funniest schism of characterization that I think I've seen in a while. And I don't know if Casey did that intentionally. I don't think so. Everything else in the song, I think, is done with a sincerity to it. There's a seriousness to everything else, even if there are some tongue-in-cheek nods to social commentary and parallels with our world. I think that the read in the world, the lore of the world, is all done from a serious perspective, which just makes it even more absurd to me. Everything else feels rather accurate. It took me a second to get into it, of course. Listening to the people in the poverty ring talk about how bad life was and me dancing along to it is definitely an odd experience. But I got over that and I started to see where the perspective was on this stuff. And this feels like a big show tune dance off with the bad guy. And it just feels a bit out of place against everything else. I'm sure that's just a me thing, but I'm curious if anybody else got that juxtaposition as well and how it impacted their experience with this final track. Interestingly, this also defeats my whole conceptual theme here where we were exploring darker and darker sounds as the album goes on, and we explore the highest parts of society that have the most control and do the most damning things to those in the city. We get to the worst person on the totem pole, and there's really not a lot of darkness in this track, is there? It dips into there a little bit, and that final halftime feel certainly lands in that realm. It is, yes, it is a good moment, both musically and thematically, but it's also a bit far and few between. It doesn't really explore it as much as I thought it was going to, given the directions the album was going. I do like, though, how the track is in 4/4. They don't have the feeling of superiority that the luxurious people think that they have, and they understand that they're just a person. They just happen to have a lot of power. There's no none of the notion, the false notion that I'm better because I'm different in my music, that kind of thing. It's just like, no, I'm better because I'm better. I'm human like you. I'm just a better human. There's nothing that differentiates us other than the fact that I have power. And so I like how we stick with 4/4 in it. It really allows the luxurious tier to have that 7/8, the 6/8, to feel like a surface level mask that they're wearing. They present themselves as superior rather than they simply are. And that's a big difference between appearance and subjectivity. They do have power, but they also have to make it look like they're different. And I think that just tells a lot about their character, and specifically, even more, the God Emperor's character. Oh man, Lord Dark Helmet dance routine. I never thought I'd write that down somewhere, but that is a note that I have about this track. Is there anything else I want to bring up here? I hit the ending, the thematic resonance, character, writing in the song. Oh yeah, I guess just the trumpets, man. They absolutely killed it. Like, jeez. All the trumpet work in this track was the best on the album. And I think that makes sense too, just coming from the perspective of like, he's the God Emperor. He's going to have the best of the best. He can afford it. He has the power. You know, why would he get a trumpet player that just is pretty good? Like a 7 out of. No, he's getting the best trumpet player in Antimai, right? So, yeah, just absolutely kills it on this track. Just some of the wildest notes, with like just perfect tone and body to them. It's just filthy. Skill wise, I mean, like, it sounds beautiful, it's gorgeous, but just the skill, like, this dude, he's got chops. Let me hit some lyrics, we'll see where that takes us. Might have some more to say after we hit the lyrics, but I think I'm out of topics at the moment. Yeah, this is exactly what I was expecting. We have a deranged, power hungry madman at the top with no opposition, talking about how much power he has. Verse 1 starts off, there is no pretenses. What a wonderland watching them bend to my demands. No pretenses at all. I am powerful. Everyone does what I say. And we even dig a little bit into how he likes to hurt people. It's not just about the power of forcing people to do stuff, it's about joy that comes from watching them toil away their life. He says, I can level any landscape. In fact, there's little left to bring me more joy. From peaks to valleys, boulevards to alleys, why waste my time trying to be a diplomat when I can deliver pain? And there's nothing that compares to how good it feels to be the one to push the domino. What's beneath it? What's ahead? No matter. The path won't wrap around till long after I'm dead. The idea that I can shake up anything I want, I can create as much turmoil as I would like, and I'll never see the repercussions. By the time they get back to me, I won't just be dead, I'll be long dead. It's not even a gamble. Maybe it'll come back to me, maybe it won't. No, I'll be long gone. This will be hundreds of years down the road until I start to see any repercussions of my actions. Absolute power. No oversight, no pushback. The bridge says you'll not gain any power unless you start with power. The idea that you can't rise up the ranks, you can only fall down them. And he says you don't start with power unless you come from the tower. All the other power is doled out. It's mine. I'm lending it to you. The patrolmen, that's my power you have. The guides, the people in luxury, that's my power you have. You don't have power because you didn't come from tower. I do like this next line. Why do you feel your world is safe? I was bred behind a barricade. the idea that I was raised in the tower, so far separated from all of you, there obviously must have been a reason for that. If the world was safe, I could have went out there. I could have explored as a child, sorry. Instead, I was kept locked in here. For my own safety, I bet. It's a very skewed perception of the world. It is one where the means justify the end. The ends justify the means? No, that's not the phrase I want. What is it? He's justifying an idea based on a completely different set of actions. There's a phrase for that. I can't think of what it is. But yeah, he says I was raised up here, completely divorced from y'all. There must be a reason for that. Probably because y'all don't live in a safe world. I don't know what y'all think you live in, but if it was safe, I'd be in there. He says, we must accept our fate. Mine was rising up to dominate. Says that at first they tried love, but it failed, unable to change minds, so fear prevailed and took control. This is another good line too. It says, why would the emperor need new clothes if he keeps the people indisposed? The whole idea of the emperor's new clothes was that he could figure out who was worthwhile of his time. If they said he wasn't wearing anything, well, his tailors told him that they were too stupid to realize he was wearing fancy clothes and he didn't need to pay them any attention. He says, why do I need all that distraction? If I just crush everything around me, if I'm this tyrant, I don't care what they think of me. Says they're blessed if they even get to see me. So line right up and praise my name. Oh, so lucky you get to live beneath me. We have a hook that is just life is a dream over and over and over and over. I don't remember this section. I don't remember a lyrically repetitive part, but it leads into, but oh, what a nightmare I could provide you. Me on a bad day, you in a bad way, and without a warning, I'll put you in mourning. When the light in you dims down, I'll blot the sun out. This is where the music started to get dark, and lyrically I think it really leans into that. We've seen some of the psychopathic behavior he's already exhibited, but I think this is the darkest and most direct it gets, especially since he brings his voice down, the music dips down, and it really shows this dark section. It reminds me of those moments in film where the camera zooms in and the lights dim down a little bit, and you really get this intense portrayal of this person for a moment, and then the camera zooms back out, the lights come back on, they're like, so let's go about our day. That's kind of what this feels like to me, because after this we come back into the chorus and it's all bright and dancy again. there's a lot of cinematography that I get from Casey's writing here in all these songs, and it makes me wonder if he's doing that purposefully. Most of the sections I can either feel a really strong like cinematographic, I don't know what that word would be. Cinematography slash directorial image that he has in his mind that he's trying to portray, or a stage play type of thing where everything's present and you get to see pieces depending on what you're choosing to look at. A little bit of directing, telling you what to see, and leaving it all up there and allowing you to listen for what you want. And I think that's pretty cool. There are times when he wants total control over the situation to make you feel a way, and there's other times where he lets go of your hand and says, find out what you think you feel about this part of the track. And sometimes that's a bit scary. I started off the album a bit shaky because I wasn't looking at the things he wanted me to, and I wasn't really connecting with the album in a way that I felt I should have been. But he gave me that power. He released it of himself and said, take from it what you will. And I gotta give props for that. I think that's a really big deal. it's really difficult to let your art be interpreted freely. I know I have a problem with that too. When I release music on my channel, I put it in the description what my, what I think it's about, how I, a quick little description of it. And usually I get a couple nice comments about some stuff, and it doesn't take much to nudge me into explaining something. I'll be like, oh, yeah, you like that instrument? I picked it because of this. And I'll explain it and I'll tell people what I'm doing. And I should probably stop that. I mean, it's nice at times, I think. Much like here, there's a moment where he wanted us to feel something specific. And so he grabbed our head and pointed us directly at it and said, look at what's happening, and then released it and said, now you're back to doing whatever you want. So having that control is certainly good at points, but letting go is important, I think, as an artist. Which should make perfect sense. It's like my whole job up here is for me to interpret stuff, and sometimes it's alongside the authorial intent, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes I make really good, uh, really strong theses, analyses, reasonings about why a song would be about a specific thing, and then someone will send me an interview. Actually, they weren't thinking about that at all. I'm like, oh, okay. I still think it was a good read, though, right? I backed it up. It was well supported. And I like music that tends to be more ambiguous like that. And yet I try to control the narrative around my own music. All right. Do I have anything else to say here? I don't think so. I still find this one song to be a bit odd. I suppose if it had become any darker, it would have felt outside of the realms of the story as a whole. It would have been an outlier on the album. And I suppose you can still have a playfulness to a darkness. And maybe that's what he was going for, something a bit more lighthearted while still leaning into a little nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Wasn't that pretty dark kind of thing? Keeping it light but heavy. In some ways, it reminds me of a musical that nobody watched. It got canceled twice, called Gallivant. And the king, who is a bit incompetent, but also kind of devious and evil in some ways, especially in the first season, has a lot of songs like this. Traditional style of like stage play, dance numbers, bright poppy music, catchy hooks, but dark lyrics. The music never really leans into it, but it explains his character. He just casually says, hey, if you don't do what I want, servant, I'll hang you like I did your father. It's just like it's played for laughs because of the juxtaposition of the music that's, and the way he's delivering it with a smile on his face and a bright, catchy chorus. So I think I feel some of that here too, but at least with Gallivant, it's delivered as a musical comedy. And the first 7 tracks of this don't tell me this is a comedic album, which makes the juxtaposition a little odd. But I think it's just something I need a couple listens to, get around to understanding it, feeling it out a little better. And, as usual, I'm looking forward to the comments on it as well. How do you feel about this final track, especially longtime fans, maybe people who have painstakingly scraped over the details of this album? Does this final track feel more cohesive to you? Does it connect with the rest of the album better? Does the God Emperor singing such a bright, snazzy, jazzy tune have any sort of dissonance for you? The more I think about it, I think it really is just the name. The God Emperor set me up on so many tracks to envision a specific person ruling with an iron fist, body like a Greek god, 7 foot tall, just a mean dude. And then That was never going to happen, though. Musically, it could never fit, and Casey isn't going to change his voice that much to do it. I know that from listening to the Deer Hunter tracks I've heard. It's just not what Casey does. So I think I set myself up on that, now that I think about it. All right. I think I've touched on everything. Those are my thoughts. Antimai, the Deer Hunter. I greatly enjoyed this. I'm looking forward to the next one, and I'm interested in checking out the prologue short story as well as the prologue EP. Primarily because I'm in on this, almost at the ground floor. At least I can be caught up before the next one comes out relatively quickly. It's very different than when Act 5 came out and I still had a lot of music to listen to before getting into that. Or wait, did Act 5 come out? I don't remember. I think it came out right after I started my channel. So yeah, it was going to be real difficult for me to catch up on that. But here, all I got was one more EP and a short film. I think I can do that. And then when the next one drops, I can hit the ground running. We'll get along with it. Maybe we'll even have a release week album review or something. I don't know. I got crazy plans in the future, I guess. That'll be fun though. I should do more of stuff like that. Anyways, that's 4 hours long. Let's wrap this up. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know your perspectives, opinions, thoughts, any of that stuff. Put it down in the comments. I had a ton of questions in here if you want to answer any of them. And I know I had some takes on this album. I think my analysis is pretty strong, but I'm always open to other people's opinions and stuff like that. Let me know if you think I'm wrong in any places. In the description box, you'll find a link to No. In the description, you'll find a link to Linktree. They tried to banish me to the Shadow Realm. That link, if you click it, it takes you to this menu. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Where are they? Hello? Interesting. Yeah, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate those. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.